right, let's call this meeting to order at 7:02 p.m. Start with a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join me in a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Sunshine law notice. In accordance with the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act, public meetings may be held in person or by means of communication equipment to include streaming services and other online meeting platforms. This meeting is being held in person through the Zoom meeting platform, being broadcast from Borough Hall, 748 River Road, Fairhaven, New Jersey. Public participation for this regular council meeting of August 15th, 2022 is available by call-in phone number or through web conference Zoom. Members of the public will be on mute until it is time for questions or comments, which will be announced. At that time, the public has the opportunity to question or comment by phone or through Zoom by the raise hand button and will be called on at the appropriate time. Notice of this meeting was included in the schedule of meetings, which was adopted by resolution number 2022-13 and sent to the Asbury Park Press, the Two River Times, the Hub, and the Star Ledger on January 6, 2022. Posted on the Borough website, the Bulletin Board of the Municipal Building, and has remained continuously posted as required under the statute. With adequate notice having been given, the Borough Clerk is directed to include the statement in the minutes of this meeting. Allison, may I please have a roll call?
Councilmember Commissioner Keith. Here. Cole. Here. Here. McHugh.
Here.
Neff. Here. Rodriguez.
Here. Okay, workshop session, starting off with the proposed restaurant ordinance amendments, Attorney Cannon and Mike Irene.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, and council. If you'd like to propose them, or should I do it?
Yeah, I think that's a good spot.
Yeah.
If you rather spread out front table, that's fine as well.
Thank you.
Whatever's.
Good. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Irene. I'm the zoning board attorney for the Borough of Fairhaven, and I was privileged to participate with the restaurant committee, working up and submitting for your consideration proposed restaurant ordinance provision revisions. Would you like a brief overview of what we did and how we got to this point, or would you?
Please.
And I'd be happy to do so. So, as the mayor and governing body knows, the committee was tasked with reviewing the existing ordinances that define restaurants in the Borough of Fairhaven, determining whether it would be appropriate to consider revisions, and so to submit proposed revisions for your consideration. The committee worked for approximately 2.5 years. After that was through COVID. And we began by reviewing what exists. We solicited input from the residents of the Borough of Fairhaven, reviewed the master plan. We reviewed a number of ordinances from other municipalities. We reviewed some case law. And the committee recognized early on in the process that the borough is rather unique in some of its overarching characteristics. It's primarily residential, as we all know. It has small business districts that are limited in scope and surrounded by heavily developed residential neighborhoods. And the concerns expressed not only by the residents of the borough, but also by the committee members who focused primarily on what are the impacts of the business district on the residential neighborhoods, particularly with regard to intensity of use, traffic, hours of operation, and quality of life. So when we looked at what exists today, we determined that it would be appropriate to consider revising and streamlining the ordinances. And if I may, I'll just take a minute of your time to walk you through what currently exists so you can understand how we reached that determination. Then, of course, the secondary determination is what do we do at that point? How do we fix them? How do we change them? How do we improve them? some of the review of these ordinances resulted from litigation that occurred with regard to the Dunkin' Donuts matter in Borough. And as a result of that, the ordinances were scrutinized in detail, not only as a result of the hearing before the zoning board, the review by the zoning officer, but also by two courts, the trial court and the appellate court. Ultimately, we're upheld in our determination. And for those of you who want a brief overview, what happened is the Dunkin' Donuts submitted an application for development at the location in the shopping center over there. And Nick Perchinsky, our zoning officer, did an outstanding job, did a terrific job. Made a determination that that was what is known under our current ordinances as a category 2 restaurant. The net result of that was that it was permitted, but it had to go to the planning board for site plan review and approval. Interested parties took exception to Nick's determination. They filed an appeal with the zoning. And the zoning board had a hearing where we considered the appeal and also interpreted the ordinance. At the end of the day, the board determined that Mr. Perchinsky was correct, that it was a category 2 restaurant, and that it should go to the planning board for site plan review. And ultimately, that's what it did. That's what it did. Our determination that the zoning board was challenged at the trial court level, the trial court affirmed us, and it was challenged again at the appellate division level, once again, the appellate affirmed us. But as a result of that process, focusing in on the ordinances, we noticed that improvement could be had. So when you look at the current ordinances, we define restaurant, and then there are 4 categories of restaurants. There's category 1, category 2, category 3, and a drive-in restaurant. It almost appears when you read the definitions in the ordinances that they likely were not crafted at the same time. They don't fit very well together, but there is a progression when you read them together. So for instance, one of the things we noted is when you look at the definition of restaurant itself in current ordinances, says any establishment, however designated, at which food is sold for consumption on the premises. On the premises. Normally, the patron's seated within an enclosed building, and then it accepts out snack bars and things like that at public facilities. But right off the start, one of the things we notice is the lead sentence in the restaurant definition says any establishment, however designated, at which food is sold for consumption on the premises. Then we move into the progressions, the categories. So the first one is category 1 restaurant, and that's pretty much self-evident. That's primarily table service. But it tells us a category 1 restaurant is primarily table service, no substantial takeout, no delivery, no drive-through, no drive-in or service in vehicles, and no service at counters or bars unless there's a liquor license. So one of the things as we were looking at that, we said, well, no delivery. Okay, in most part, table service restaurants don't do that. But during the pandemic, a lot of them. And a lot of other restaurants that might be considered sit-down restaurants now have kind of pick up on the side and things like that. So we looked at that. We also looked at category 2 restaurants. So the progression is category 1, primarily table service. Category 2 is like category 1, but with a category 2, you can also have carry out and delivery. But you can't have a drive-through and you can't have drive-in vehicle service. But note that category 2, in addition to table service, can also have carry out and delivery. So what does that do with the overarching restaurant definition that I read a minute ago that said any establishment, however designated, which food is sold for consumption on the premises? So there was a glitch there. We also looked at and by the way, category 1 and category 2 restaurants are both permitted. And my recollection is if one is permitted in the zone, I think it's just a B1, B2 zones. If one is permitted in the zone, the other is permitted. Category 3 restaurant is similar to category 2, except the category 3 can have a drive-through. Category 3 restaurants are currently expressly prohibited in the ordinance. There are none. Can't have a drive. And the last category was drive-in restaurant. That wasn't category 4, it was drive-in restaurant. And the definition of that is rather interesting too. That reads, an establishment where the majority of the patrons purchase food, soft drinks, ice cream, and similar confections for takeout or consumption on the premises but outside the confines of the principal building, or in automobiles parked upon the premises regardless of whether or not, in addition thereto, seats or other accommodations are provided for patrons. So the orders create problems, because you could read it, stopping it before the first door, an establishment where the majority of the patrons purchase food, soft drinks, ice cream, and similar confections for takeout, which starts to sound like your category 2 restaurant. There was also some concern about the terms that are used. There can be confusion between drive-through and drive-in. Drive-through, drive-in, you drive in and drive out. The board ultimately determined that if you read the ordinance in its entirety, as you should, you can see the progression. Category 1 is generally a sit-down table service restaurant. Category 2 has some sit-down features, but it also allows takeout and delivery. Category 3 is similar to category 2, but it has a drive-through, which is prohibited in the borough. And then you get to this drive-in restaurant, which the board interpreted to mean a classic drive-in like the Sonic's or the stores. And that's the only way it makes sense. Now, in the litigation, the interested party said, well, if you can have the majority of the patrons purchasing food, soft drinks, ice cream, and similar confections for takeout, or as a drive-in, then the Dunkin' Donuts is a drive-in. It's not a category 2, as Mr. Brzezinski said. And the board disagreed. We went through the progression. But the problem is, and the reason we ultimately prevailed in the court is we argued to the court that if you read the language that's suggested by the interested parties in the litigation, the definitions implode upon themselves. Everything becomes a drive-in, except for the category 1. So you're left with the category 1, and you're left with all the others being drive-ins, which makes no sense. And the ordinance on its face is inherently inconsistent, and you shouldn't read an ordinance that way. Instead, read it the way we read it, where there's progression. And the court agreed. But nevertheless, the committee went through this and realized that these things should likely be cleaned up. So to do that, as I said, the committee engaged with the citizens of the borough of Fairhaven, solicit their input. We looked at the master plan. We recognize that the borough is primarily residential in neighbor and has limited nature and has limited business districts that are surrounded by heavily developed residential areas. We noticed also in the master plan reexamination report that there was significant concern raised about traffic, noise, buffering between residential zones and the business zones. And we tried to incorporate that into the direction of, okay, if we're going to make changes, what is the nature of those changes and what would we recommend? So the first thing we recommended is cleaning up the overarching definition of restaurant itself. So when you read the proposed definition of restaurant, which is in Mr. Cannon's draft ordinance, gone is the language about for consumption on premises. And now it's a more generic restaurant definition. An establishment or business where food and or beverages are prepared and served or dispensed to patrons and consumed at the establishment and or taken out and or delivered for off-premises consumption, and then we expressly exclude fast food restaurants and drive-in restaurants, which are specifically defined uses following. So essentially, it's not a fast food restaurant, and it's not a drive-in restaurant, but it's a restaurant, it's a permitted restaurant, and it's going to be permitted in either B1 and B2. Okay? So we got rid of category 1 and category 2 and collapsed them, but excluded fast food restaurants and drive-ins. So what did we do for drive-ins? We tried to make it more of the classic, we consider the classic drive-in, and we define that in the proposed ordinances as an establishment or business essentially designed so that the food is both served to and consumed by patrons while they're parking vehicles on the premises, regardless of whether or not seating may also be provided. So we were trying to define the classic drive-in, the Sonic, the Stewart's, those kinds of things. We also defined a drive-through window. It's one sentence that's self-apparent. So in the proposal, drive-in restaurants, drive-through windows, and fast food restaurants are prohibited. So the $1 million question. How did we define fast food restaurant? Okay. And this was the product of a number of revisions. And remember, we had a committee, and of course, everybody has in their mind their own perception of how it should be defined. When we first drafted it, some committee members thought the language was too specific, others thought it was not restrictive enough. We added language, we changed language, we took language out, we added more language. And there were these various iterations until we got it basically to what you see in front of you now. So the fast food restaurant, as we define it, is an establishment or business which is essentially designed to quickly prepare, package, and dispense to customers for quick or ready consumption a limited, uniform, or standardized variety of food and beverage products. That initial portion of the definition was taken out of one of the tables. And I'm going to embellish that a little bit in a moment if I may. But then after various give and take with the committee members, some further discussions, we added the next language, which is, and where the menu and or practices of such an establishment or business are generally prescribed by contractual, franchise, or other such agreements. And then we added this language to temper that, to facilitate rapid service and turnover of customers. And then we added the last sentence. Such establishments or businesses may or may not have tables, and the food and beverage products may be sold for consumption inside the building and or on local premises. So one of the things that we focused on is we regulate uses, we don't regulate uses. We're concerned with the use of the land, not who may be using it. Okay? Because if I like you, you can do it. If I don't like you, you can't do it. We don't go there. It's the use of the land. So the effort was to try and fine tune the language. We started with 2 New Jersey, and it's interesting, when we did the research on the case law, it struck me as remarkable how little case law there is in the state of New Jersey on land use issues regarding fast food restaurants. They come up in tort law, slip and fall in the parking lot, they come up for signage, very limited on issue of fast food restaurant. And part of the problem is, as I had a conversation with someone else, is the whole notion of restaurants has evolved so quickly in recent years. You know, years ago it was table service and it was fast food restaurants. Then you got casual, then you got fast casual, and you got all these little subcategories. And many of the ordinances failed to keep the pace. They, in many cases, were archaic. We saw some of the ordinances talk about luncheonettes, lunch wagons, coffee shops. And when you looked at the ordinances that were much more current, much more detailed, they tend to be from municipalities that generally were on highways, highway access. And that's where you found all the regulations about fast food restaurants. So it was hard in many cases to bridge the gap. So we started with 2 cases, which, if you had a chance to see the memo that we submitted, that I submitted to the committee, there's a case from 1964, very briefly, it's a New Jersey Supreme Court case. And the importance of that case is it originates in the Borough of Fairlawn. And it was surprising how similar the Borough of Fairlawn, at least in that case, is described as being to what we perceive the Borough of Fairhaven. It was essentially residential in character. It had limited business districts that were surrounded by heavily developed residential neighborhoods. I'm talking about Fairhaven. And in that case, the municipality prohibited fast food restaurants. Some of the language talks about drive-in restaurants, but when you read through the case a little bit more, you can see it's more than just a drive-in. So originally, the judge in that case struck down the ordinance and he said, you can't do this. Yes, we understand you're concerned about rowdiness, noise, traffic, litter, but you know what? That's public safety. Let the police do it. Let the Board of Health do it. And the town took the case up, went all the way to the New Jersey Supreme Court, and the New Jersey Supreme Court said, no, you can regulate the use of land as long as it's within the authority granted by the enabling statute. In our case, it's a municipal land use law. And as long as the regulations you impose are legitimate and reasonably tailored to your circumstances. So what were the circumstances in that case? They were concerned about rowdiness, they were concerned about litter, they were concerned about traffic, and they were concerned about the impact of fast food restaurants in these limited business districts to the neighboring heavily developed residential neighborhoods. Sounds like this one don't vary. They also noted that other towns had banned fast food restaurants. So based upon those factors, the court upheld the ordinance. Now that's 1964. That's 60 some odd years ago. So we also found a more current case, Saddlebrook Realty case. That's a 2006 appellate division case, still 16 years out. But they describe the borough of Saddlebrook, and once again, it's primarily residential in nature. It's surrounded, strike that, it has limited business districts that are surrounded by heavily developed residential neighborhoods, much like the borough of Fairhaven. The interesting thing about that case is they had a commercial district that already had 3 fast food restaurants, a Burger King, McDonald's, and KFC. And when Wendy's came in, the town said, no more, and they passed an ordinance, no more fast food restaurants. The trial court overturned, the appellate division reversed and said it's a legitimate zoning purpose. We looked at the definition. The court cites the definition of fast food restaurants in Saddlebrook, and we began there. And that says an establishment or business which is essentially designed to dispense a limited variety of food and beverages, which are so prepared, packaged in paper or in other types of disposable wrappers and containers in a form for quick or ready consumption. And it goes on to say such establishments may or may not have tables, and the food and beverages may be sold for consumption inside the building and or off premises. That's the exact same last sentence we have. We started with their first sentence, if you go back to fast food restaurant, and then we embellished it. And once again, no pride of authorship. That's the product of the committee members' back and take. There was a case from Jersey City in 2019. Jersey City, the mayor of Jersey City, in his last election campaign, announced that he was going to prohibit formula restaurants, chain restaurants, because he wanted to protect mom and pop businesses. So what they did is they adopted an ordinance that in 100 of the, there are 100 redevelopment areas in Jersey City, in 41 of them, they precluded formula restaurants if you had at least 10 units within 300 miles of the location in Jersey City. So essentially they were targeting chains. They were going after users rather than the nature of the use. There was also some other quirks because when the redevelopment agreement was signed with that particular developer, that restriction wasn't in there. He went ahead and started developing the project, and that restriction got put in there. They went to court and they sued violation of the Commerce Clause, violation of the First Amendment, violation of due process, and Jersey City ran off the white flag and withdrew their ordinance. So we tried to avoid that because, again, the goal was not going after any particular use. It's the nature of the use. And when we started with the fast food restaurant definition that was drawn from that Saddlebrook case, and you look at the first sentence or the first component of the first sentence, an establishment or business which is essentially designed to quickly prepare, package, and dispense to customers for quicker ready consumption, a limited, uniform, or standardized variety of food and beverage products. And there was some concern there that that didn't fully capture fast food restaurants as many of the committee members understand them. They thought there should be more. Would that catch up Mike's ice cream shop? Making the cones, somebody comes in, it's quickly dispensed and out like that. So there were a number of the committee members wanted to drill down and fine tune the language more. And that's where the second component was added about the standardization of the practices or the menu, not in and of itself, but if you read the last clause, to facilitate rapid service and turnover of customers. So the whole notion is this was geared towards the intensity of the use, the facilitation of the turnover, the traffic, the noise, the litter, the extended hours that we perceive to be the product of classic fast food. So that was the process. We started with the existing ordinances. We looked to see what was available. We looked to see what happened in Jersey City. We compared some of the local ordinances. We started with the Saddlebrook Realty ordinance that was upheld, and we added some things to it. That was the product of various discussion back and forth between the committees.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
That's great. Greg, anything to add before Just start working around the
Nothing
dice.
particular, I thought that was
Okay.
excellent. Thank you.
Councilwoman Chris McKee, any questions? Comments?
Yeah, a couple questions. First, thanks, Mike, to you and the committee for all the hard work. I knew, this took a lot of back and forth, in meetings. One of the questions I have a couple, adding the last sentence to the fast food restaurant definition. What does that do for the fast food restaurant definition, I guess? Because it's also reflected with some different language, but I think it says the same thing in the restaurant definition. So I'm just curious if it's additive or I
I
don't
mean,
know.
the very last sentence, which says such establishments or businesses may or may not have tables.
Mhm.
Okay, that. The genesis of that was originally the Saddlebrook Realty.
Okay,
So the first part is derived, the first part of the definition is derived from Saddlebrook Realty. That last sentence is exactly from Saddlebrook Realty. We then tweaked the first part a little bit
mhm,
and we added the, what I'm gonna call the middle, which is the standardization practice. I think in general, the reason that we see some of that language about may or may not have tables is to avoid a situation where, assuming it meets the definition of fast food restaurant, they come in and say, well, we have 2 tables in front. It's a sit-down. I think
Right.
that's the purpose.
and then so I guess part of my inquiry is if it's in both definitions, I'm wondering if there's a benefit or a way to mirror image the language. Because I'm thinking, play this out to the end, who's actually using and working with this definition. It's going to be the potential proprietors, owners, whoever it is who wants to open up
And
a
your zoning.
restaurant. Yeah.
And your zoning, yes.
Yes, and our zoning officer, exactly. So when I think about that, I think about, making these definitions as simple and clean as possible. I realize there's always some gray area, but I wonder if there's a way, and for maybe future consideration after this meeting, if we can mirror image that language from the first definition to the second or vice versa. Because we say kind of the same thing. Food and beverages are prepared and served or dispensed to patrons, consumed at the establishment or taken out and or delivered. It's kind of the same thing as may or may not have tables, and the food and beverage may be sold for consumption inside and or off premises. So I'd be interested in making the language the same so that, Joe and Sally, who are sitting down trying to decide if they could put their restaurant in Fairhaven, that they can see that we're saying the same thing.
The only thing I certainly believe in consistency.
Yeah,
The only thing I would suggest, Councilwoman, is the last sentence from fast food is not replicated in the new restaurant definition. In fact, if I may, the way we approached it was, we defined restaurant very broadly. This is a restaurant. Sit down, take out, deliver, this is a restaurant. But what it's not is what we say a fast food restaurant is, and what we say a drive-in restaurant is. So if it's not one of those, it's a restaurant. And I think the reason that language, which we pulled out of the Saddlebrook case, is added to the fast food restaurants, I say, was to preclude someone saying, well, we've got 2 things. But if you think that adds some ambiguity, I'm not wed to it. Like I said, no pride of office here.
yeah,
Was collaborating with several different people who were changing this, we were trying to get consensus.
yeah, I just wonder if there's a simplification that can happen, because my impression is that you're saying the same thing, but you're using different words and language. And so it lends some confusion to it. I think just more broadly speaking, some of my concerns are around language that is designed to further enhance this fast food definition.
Mhm.
but are ambiguous, the word quickly, quick or ready. Generally, essentially, I worry for our zoning officer, and then I also worry that we are going to be in the same scenario that were with Dunkin' Donuts, which we're trying to avoid. And so some of these, again, I worry about that, but I also, again, worry about Sally and Joe sitting down trying to decide, can we go apply in Fairhaven? What does quickly mean? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes? Well, does it depend? Does it depend what you're making? If it's a cake and you make it in 10 minutes, is that considered quick versus a coffee that takes 10 minutes? That would be considered a long time, right? So I don't, and that's not your fault. I think these are the words that we're trying to get into this definition here. But they give a sense of gray area, latitude and discretion that I
So the problem
worry about.
was when we started out and had the language shorter, it was more vague.
Yes, I think that's probably true also.
Then you
Yes.
look at it and say, oh, it's vague, what does it mean?
Yeah.
So we try to drill down and fine tune.
Right.
So the notion would be, as I say, when we tried to, rather than define things separately that were side by side, we said, this is a restaurant, but these two things aren't. And then we tried to fine tune what those, and drive-in restaurant was relatively easy. It was the fast food that we spent all the time on, because as I say, the uses have evolved so much. Fast casual, fast casual, fast food, that we tried to get back to and there was even a lot of discussion about avoiding like franchises. We don't want to seem like we're going after chains, but we're not.
Right,
It's not the user, it's the nature of the use. And those uses are designed to flip customers.
right,
That's the program. To get people in and out as quickly as possible. There's your traffic and your noise and your litter and all the things that you're trying to, for lack of a better word, regulate because they're so incompatible with the surrounding residential.
right. Was there any discussion, and maybe it's better suited for a member of the committee, about whether these definitions, again, can be easily digested by the restaurant owner, and again, I go back to my example. I want them to be able to engage and understand and be able to have a prognosis without having to hire a professional. Because my concern is you sit down and you say, here's these four towns we're considering going to, with this is where I want to open my restaurant. I want to see, okay, this, I'm really concerned because we have some other such agreement. Is that going to knock me right out? I might as well go over here where where clearly I fit.
Mhm.
So I worry this is going to turn off potential businesses from coming here.
Can I address that?
Yeah.
And actually, that's a point well taken, and we spent a lot of time on it. Here's the way we did it. What about this? What about that? What about, and trying to, I don't want to say walk the line, but craft the language to fine tune it enough to be able to focus on what it is we were seeking to regulate because of the potential negative impacts, the fast food restaurant, not restaurants. So, for instance, the language when we first drafted it, and maybe the second draft, and maybe the third draft, when we started with the Saddlebrook Realty. When you read the language out of that case that I quoted first,
Right,
what about Mike's Ice Cream Shop?
right,
What about Mike's Ice Cream Shop? Is that a, yeah, what about Mike's Deli? Yeah. Well, if you read the language to dispense a limited variety of food and beverages, which are prepared, packaged in paper, there's your ice cream cone, or other types of, right? So we, as much as you can, we tried to test it. And that's when we started to add, even though initially there was some resistance, and I even had some, that second component about the standardization. And again, I don't want to focus on franchise, but contractual franchise, other agreements to facilitate rapid service. The purpose is the entire operation is designed to generate rapid turnover of customers, and that's the intensity of use, that's the traffic. And that's how we try to address your concern, which is a very real concern, because all of a sudden we're catching up restaurants that don't meet what you would think of as your classic definition of a fast food restaurant. You know,
So
another, an
it's
easy-
so just,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, that's okay, I just wanna make sure I'm understanding then what you're suggesting is that. The general prescription by contractual franchise or other such agreements modifies. The balance of that, of the rapid service and
Exactly.
turnover of
So-
customers, so you, if you eliminate one or the other, then. You're okay.
Well, and if you read even a little bit in the prior, the initial language, which we tweaked from the case, we added limited, uniform, or standardized variety of food. But even that, some members thought that's still, that you still may catch up Mike's Ice Cream Shop.
Right,
He's only got 3 flavors.
Right.
So that's when we got added the other language. And then the other language, we had some concerns, and I had some concerns. Are we getting too close to users, not uses? I don't think so, but then we put back in all of that to facilitate, designed to generate rapid services. So there was this, as I say, constantly polishing it, trying to fine tune the definition. Now, is it perfect? I would never claim that it's perfect. And as I say, no pride of authorship. I was taking the comments from the board members, who really did give this committee members, who gave it a lot of thought.
yeah,
And we did that exercise of what about this and what about that? Because we envision this is what Nick Krasinski is going to have to do, or as you say, potential business owners.
right. Okay, I don't believe I have any additional questions right now, I'm interested to hear anybody else, thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you, Councilwoman Net.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for the thorough explanation. I think it was incredibly clear the way you walked us through what you've done for 2.5 years, which is a lot of work put into this.
Well, the committee. they
Yes.
deserve the credit. It was their efforts.
I think the fast food restaurant paragraph to me is very well done. I'm not a legal expert, I'm not a lawyer, but when I read it, I think I can understand what you're trying to get to, and I wouldn't take out of that first sentence any piece, because I think as per your explanation is the whole part, that whole of it that gets you to that final definition, so you're not catching, like they said, the ice cream shop that you don't want to catch. I also think that last sentence is important because it makes sure that whether you have 1 or 2 tables and whether the person decides to have their cheeseburger indoors, that's still a fast food restaurant. And so I would not take out that second sentence. In fact, I wouldn't touch that fast food restaurant section at all. To me, it's very well done. I guess the question I have is whether when you say under the restaurant definition, an establishment or business where food and or beverages are prepared or served or dispensed to patrons and consumed at the establishment or taken out or delivered off premises. Wouldn't we expect that the takeout set part or the delivery of premises to be a lesser portion of that business, or not necessarily?
Well, see, that's why when we worked through the definitions that you had, you have the class 1 and class 2 now. And there were some issues, for instance, class 1 we delivered. Pandemic, they were all delivering, and
Right.
some of them may keep it, so that was a problem. So we saw that the class 1 and class 2 were really kind of merging together in the real world. So we looked at, rather than trying to split those, we looked at defining a restaurant. This is a restaurant, you can have a restaurant in the B1, B2 zone, but you can't have these 2 things because they're defined separately. So if you look at it, are you a fast food restaurant? Yes, then you're out. Are you a drive-in restaurant? Yes, then you're out. Are you a fast food restaurant or a drive-in restaurant? No, then you're in. We thought that was the better way to do it. Look at the exclusions, and if you're not one of those, you're good.
Okay. All right, I mean.
But this is helpful too, because now we have a whole new array of people who are looking at it and bringing their perceptions and testing it as we tried to do.
Yeah, I mean, my only concern is just to make sure that we're clear on that a first sentence on restaurant, if we think we are, that's good. The fast food restaurants that paragraph, I actually think is very good the way it is. And maybe there's enough clarity between the two. I'll guess I'll pass it along to Mr. Rodriguez.
My questions are less technical. They're more, first of all, thanks to the committee, of course. Thank you for your service as well, to all the attorneys involved. Really, thanks to Betsy, who I think has poured a lot of time and effort into this as well. I'm interested in how did the process go? What are some of the dangling things that you're still not sure of? What are the things that we really need to consider going forward, other than, you know, the technical aspects of all of this? So, and it may not be a question for you, but it might really be a question for Betsy or some of the committee members.
I'm not aware of anything that's dangling. As I say, the notion was, this is what we have. Do we think it merits improvement? Yes, we do. And the question was, how do we improve it? And also, as part of that, do we want to make substantive changes to further the goals of the master plan about protecting the character of the community, particularly the adjoining residential neighborhoods and business. And that was then the focus on, we think it should be improved. We think the language can be improved this way. We collapsed category 1 and category 2 of the restaurant. We culled out drive-in restaurant. And then the difficult task, as Betsy would tell you, was, all right, we thought the fast food restaurant generates negative impacts on the residential areas. Case law says it does. Other towns have dealt with it. We followed. We took some of their language and improved it. We had the same characteristics, and when you read the language from those two cases and they describe the towns, you could plug in Fairhaven for Fairlawn. They were parallel, and it's the same elements that are in our master plan reexamination in 2016. About the residential neighborhoods, highly developed, surrounding the small business districts, traffic, buffering, things like that. And we sought to further those, and the determination made by the committee was the way to further those goals is to regulate fast food restaurants. And then the most difficult part of the whole process was, okay, how do we define that?
Mhm. And so my last question would be, or maybe it's not a question, maybe it's a statement. I assume this is quite defendable because of the amount of time and the effort that you put in and all the homework that you've done. You feel pretty confident that this will stand up, because it felt like the last one had a lot of holes in it and a lot of overlapping language.
I just think, I think the last one needed to be improved, and,
Yep.
and has been. Would I love to be able to pull the language right out of a case? I would, an ordinance. We've gone beyond that, but again, as I was saying with Councilwoman Christopher Keith, part of that was because the committee really wrestled with defining fast food, and also by doing so, not dragging in other restaurants that really aren't fast food restaurants. But when you read that language out of the case, Mike's Ice Cream Shop could probably, someone say, yeah, you're not allowed, Mike, because you look at this language. People are coming in, getting their ice cream in the little paper wrapper, they're coming in and coming out, you're out. So that's the problem. Would I love to have language where I could just pull out and say, this has already been upheld? Yeah. I can't, but I think from the discussion that the presentation that I gave you and some of the colloquy with your colleagues here, you can see how we got to where we get. I think most courts would look at it and say it makes sense. Is it possible somebody could say, oh, the word franchise is in there, you're trying to prevent change? No, because here's an example. I don't know, pick one. Panera is a chain. I don't think that's a fast food restaurant. Now, Nick may, but I don't. It's fast casual. That's a chain. We're not precluding chains. We're precluding fast food restaurants because of the adverse impacts they have on residential areas.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What's the process if Duncan decided they want to move somewhere else within Fairhaven?
They would submit a zoning permit application. Here's a presumption. They don't have to, but they go right to a board if they believe they need to leave. But normally what happens is they would submit a zoning permit application to your zoning officer saying, we want to establish this business this location and this zone. In many cases, your zoning officer, Mr. Pachinski, would say, I need more information. I need to know more about this use. Because for instance, you're in the B1 zone, restaurants are permitted. I need to determine if you're a restaurant or if you're one of these two exclusions, a fast food restaurant or a drive-in. So I need more information about drive. He'll provide it. He'll look at it. And he'll either say, you're a permitted restaurant, or he'll say, you're a non-permitted fast food restaurant or a non-permitted drive-in restaurant, and he'll deny the zoning permit. And by the way, the zoning officers, the old saying is when in doubt, deny. So if it's a close call, and he's not sure, he'll deny. But that's why we tried to make the definition, particularly fast food restaurants, specific as we did. But if he denies it, then the applicant has a right to take an appeal to the zoning board. And also, they can also ask for an interpretation of zoning laws. And the benefit of that is the board then has a hearing, and we can really develop the facts about what is the nature of this use. The other possibility is they could simply say, as happened in the cases as well, we're just going to go to the zoning board and ask for use variance. We agree or not, we want to use variance. The law does not favor use variances because they run contrary to the zoning scheme. They have a high standard of proof. And as a matter of fact, the law stacks the deck against use variance applications. They require what we call supermajority, no less than 5 voting members. Councilwoman Neff knows this from the service on the zoning law. No less than 5 affirmative votes out of a maximum 7 voting members. So you really have a lot.
One more question, and not that you necessarily know these companies, but Sweet Green Chop, just salad. Under this language, are those fast food
I
restaurants?
don't know those, I know of them vaguely. I was thinking more Panera because there was one over in Shrewsbury. My thought, if I were your zoning officer, now understand that your zoning officer makes the call, not me. But I don't think I think of that as a fast casual. I don't think of that as a fast food. Panera.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilman Koch.
No, I would just like to thank Mike for all your hard work. You took 2.5 years and distilled it into about 20 minutes. And it was perfect. Thank you.
You were at the helm of the committee, Councilwoman, so thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman McHugh.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mike, and
So,
especially your volunteers for this, and what a time to discuss takeout and drive-throughs during pandemic. So barring any other pandemics, I think downline uses are good, but just for my own personal reference here in the effort of like distilling the information. I realize maybe some things are amended to kind of provide us with a concise packet here. And overall, I just want to also just say this is good, and I think going forward in Fairhaven, having this dependable, it's a good thing, because it's like the knockdown of houses, rebuilding of them, I wouldn't be surprised if the bullseye's on the business district next. So kind of getting ahead of this, a wake-up call with fast food restaurants. It's also just permitted uses in general in our districts is a good thing. With that being said, just like a point of clarification, because this has been going on for 2.5 years. For a portion of block 45, lots 10 and 12, can we outline that on the map? Like where does that start? And just kind of specify this is for the affordable housing overlay zone.
okay,
I mean, I've seen the maps before. No, it's east of Cedar. I don't know exactly where it ends. I assume there's a residential, but then there's a bank, which is a business. Can we just do we know that offhand where the
I don't
outline
know.
is?
The planning board would likely be more up to speed on that than I am.
This has to do with the overlay district.
But if you have the zoning map, we can certainly take a look.
Yeah, so that's for
That's
that,
Allen and Hendrickson.
Yeah,
sorry,
That's Allen and Hendrickson?
so between Allen and Henderson.
Yes, but I don't want you to get confused that 35.3. So that's just section A. We're
Right.
principally only amending section B. That just happens to be, so you don't lose your place in your
Okay.
defined in the code. That's the overlay for Allen and Hendrickson, but that, it's actually the changes B 22. That's what we actually changed. I just put it in there so that when you looked at it, you could find it in the code and figure out, you can match it back yourself.
So in 30, attachment to non-residential districts, this is the whole. It says non-residential districts, I'm assuming that's what we call the business district.
Generally, yes.
Chapter 30. All right, B1, B2, B1, B2, okay. So kind of also looking ahead, the restaurant stuff is good, but I'm thinking about other businesses coming around. And if we go to attachment 7, affordable housing districts. Does that go back to the block 45, lot 10 and 12? Area?
Partly, but I believe it also includes other areas like the M&M project, other places where you have the potential for development for affordable housing. So it pertains to, yes, the one we're talking about, those two block lots, but also anywhere in town where you have your overlay zone for your affordable housing.
Okay, so, banks, no drive-through services, another kind of debate. Predates my time here, drive-through uses, that'd be like a gas station as well.
Well, we define, again, we didn't
Pharmacy,
we didn't review banks or anything like that. We defined drive-through window for our purposes as a portal through food or beverages are dispensed. Because my recollection is, and again, this is going back at the very outset, when we first even talked about drive-throughs, what about bank drive-throughs and things like that? So we defined it for our purposes as a portal where our window with food or beverages are dispensed.
and as part of the larger drafting the ordinance, I figured if you guys didn't want drive-throughs for food, you really wouldn't want drive-throughs for much for anything. So if you look at it, so the drive-through uses are NPs, they're not permitted, they're already taken care of in the code. So I did double check that, you're good there, and then the banks, they don't, actually, repeats it, with no drive-through services. So banks are permitted, but with the drive-through, yeah, it's all, I checked it for consistency, it matches.
Right, it seems good, yeah, to kind of, so we discriminate the use, not the franchise or something like that, and then like you were reiterating, high residential areas. Doesn't really matter what it is for a drive-through. I just thought other point of clarification, this list of says product service establishments. I know this isn't part of the changes, but I think it's worth calling out. It says permitted, but then within the text, it says motor vehicle body shops shall not be permitted.
What section are you
The-
doing, Councilman?
It goes
35.
the attachments, I'll find the same. In 7 or also in attachment 8, section 6, section 5 and section 6. It's generally defined as product service establishments having their primary function as a servicing or repair of a product, but then it specifically exempts motor vehicle body shops, but they're obviously different than jewelry and watch repair. Some intensity of use.
And that's
I believe that's consistent with your original.
just in the affordable housing district, the overlay zone.
No, I think it also extends to. Let's see, that might be the-
Right under
Yeah,
chapter 30,
forgive me.
land use and development regulations. Subsection 35.1.
Oh, I see you, in the non-residential district, it's cut off.
It is kind of.
I got you.
Formatted. It's like motor vehicle blank, next line, body shop shall not be permitted. It seems like I don't know if there's a formatting thing.
Yeah, I think it's there, and I think also in attachment 2, the prior one, it actually cut off the whole second section, which I think is what's making your confusion. Because the product service establishments are defined the same everywhere. You see how on the first one, attachment 2, it stops it as their primary function. There's clearly a formatting issue there. We take care of that prior to introduction.
So I just kind of, in the spirit of what Councilwoman Christopher was saying, we're not trying to prohibit other types of businesses or hurt any other current businesses in town. There are some motor vehicle businesses in town. Is that going to affect them anyway?
Well, they would be pre-existing non-conforming. They're entitled to remain, but they can't be expanded. And if they go away, they can't come back unless they go to the zoning board for use variance. If they're not permitted, but they're there, if they predate the zoning ordinance, we collectively as the government can't take that away from them. They have a right to maintain. But because they're pre-existing, what we call lawfully pre-existing non-conforming, assuming they predate the zoning ordinance, they can stay. They can't be expanded without coming to the zoning board for variance relief. And if they go away, if they're destroyed or abandoned over time,
Do they want to sell their business or anything?
no, that can continue.
Okay.
Because that's not abandoned, that can continue. But if a tornado wiped them off the face of the earth tomorrow, then technically they could be reestablished without getting a use variance from the zoning board.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Councilman Cole?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd also like to
I'm sorry,
commend,
Councilman.
this is perfect. I could see you and our chairman, really good sports. I'd like to see you. I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. I especially appreciate that you started with the salad buffet, and it was very intelligent, and some good basis for moving forward. To me, I just want to speak for a minute about the land use law is our main tool, our primary tool for implementing those master plan. And master plan is our roadmap. And we have been doing re-examination report for some number of years. And even in what is kind of a more slim, we'll just call it a slim document rather than full master plan update, even in our re-examination reports, it's clear that the main goals from our community, because that's a result, that's a product of public outreach, are to preserve and maintain a small town character of the business district, to calm traffic and improve our pedestrian and bike safety circulation. To me, even if we just wanted to take those two goals and use it for the basis of prohibiting fast food and driving restaurants, that would be a sound and good reason to do that. Obviously, without legislation, we can't get such goals. So what I'm leading to is something I'd like to suggest, which is we include additional language in what has been prepared and drafted. Perhaps in this front section in the whereas, where we talk about the goals of the master plan. And we identify them, call them out and expand them a little bit. And to give context, and essentially this would be a way of saying what we want, what we're trying to accomplish, and setting the development direction for the business district is what this body does, and we need to give the right tools to our zoning officer in order to be able to do that. What we have now is not right, it needs to be cleaned up, and this helps get us there. I would just like to see us flesh out some of the contextual rationale behind this, and that's not really for us, that's for, as Councilman Kristen Keefe has mentioned, to me, that's for the person who wants to open a business, they can look at it and say, oh, they're trying to make sure this stays a small scale Main Street community with small shops that service the immediate neighborhood. And neighborhood's an important word. I don't want to try to
write my comments now, but if we can get together after this, I'd like to share them. Use of the word neighborhood is important because it limits the, there's some, most of it stuff that touches on defining a trade area through the use of the word neighborhood and that being legally appropriate use of that. So save that for later perhaps, but so my thoughts were about creating context, both for the applicant, but also for a zoning officer. And it might be, we could do it in the whereas section, but we might also want to consider a summary statement. It's a very user-friendly kind of tool that takes our land use law out of detangles it maybe from the overlay district, makes it clearer, friendlier, user-friendly. I want to thank some of the committee members, especially Carolyn, who I had some time to work and talk to about this. I think we all want to make sure that we're advocating for the right thing, and independent small businesses are, that's what's going to fit in our building inventory. That's what we want to encourage. So as much as we want to prohibit something, we also want to go the extra mile to really encourage the right thing. I think we can do that in some of the whereases. I also want to throw out there maybe some granular language. I don't know if you, did the committee consider language having to do with partially fully cooked and bulk pre-prepared foods? I take it you did?
I don't recall if we considered that. No.
Or inexpensive, maybe from standardizing, like standardized you have in there.
And I'm not so sure about inexpensive. I'll get back into some of
It
the
is
comments.
relative, a lot of it is.
Councilwoman Christie.
Inexpensive.
Yeah, it is, it's hard.
Well, that's the thing, a definition does not stand on its own, right? We agree. A definition on its own can be interpreted and used. That's the need for the context.
Yes.
We know where we're trying to go, and that's part of the word that's expressed clearly in here. And the definition fits in it. The definition, I mean, it's given rise from, again, the land use ordinance that refers to capacity. I'd love to share some more history on that, but I think I'm going to try to be brief and just say the context and reference to the goals of the master plan I'd like to see, and we may want to consider an exemption for we don't want anybody getting caught up in this that doesn't need to. And some of the litter, traffic, noise, and all that stuff that is a problem that we do want to manage and control prohibit becomes less of a problem the smaller the scale of the enterprise. I know, I think Red Bank, Mr. Cannon, maybe you could look at that for us. Red Bank, I believe, has an exception for, I think it's anything under 900 square feet. I would like to look at that.
Micro business.
Yeah, I think that's it. It could be useful for Fairhaven, but I've never read it. Let's see what you think. It's important that we do this and that we do it swiftly. I think any amendments that we can make, I hope it is the council's intention to move swiftly.
Well, and I agree, the recital section
Mhm.
does include some of the basis, much of which comes from the master plan, but I agree with certainly be entirely appropriate to amplify that and pull some of the language out explicitly and put in it. It's only further support.
Yes,
It's only
exactly.
further support.
Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor, council members, I appreciate your time. And we appreciate your input, as I said, even the give and take from you all, putting a different set of eyes on things. And I appreciate the Borough Attorney Greg Cannon's input as well. And whether or not you choose to run it by your Borough Planner, not being appropriate for any further comments, where you put the final eyes, dot the i's and cross the t's. But again, I thank you for your time and consideration. Have a nice day. Yes, sir.
Moving along to AV for council, boards, commissions, and committee meetings, Chris Allworth. Yes, he is. Has chosen the podium.
Yes, good evening, everybody. I'm here tonight to give you an update on the AVA proposal for this room, actually. As you can see, we have some demonstrations on the walls that we can talk about as well. I did meet with a committee, I think, about 2 weeks ago, regarding the AVA materials, and we had questions about what it would look like in the room, who can see it, is it visible from everyone in the room? I don't know if there was any further discussion after that without me, but looking at the walls, I would recommend that we focus kind of on one wall for the TV displays. It would reduce a lot of the wiring and the kind of exposure to the building. It is a old building to get all of the wires as hidden as possible, that it looks clean. I did present I have two different quotes to all the council members. Pretty much what we're looking at, I would recommend probably 55-inch TV for each one of the locations. It would be the best bang for the buck for the size of the TV and the viewability. We're looking somewhere between 5,000 and 5,500, I would say, all said and done. That includes materials in the quote. Now, the quotes aren't added up exactly because there's a quote for a 43-inch TV, a 55-inch TV, and a 65-inch TV. So you have to go through and add up all the extra materials along with two TVs. And we're doing most of the work in-house as far as the install goes. The only part that I would need assistance with is having electric run specifically for each TV at the locations. There's no power that you want an electrical outlet somewhere up tight in the ceiling so that you try to keep the wires as thin as possible. So when all said and done, from the materials and my time to complete the project, probably somewhere between 5,000 and 5,500. And then whatever the electrician cost would be, and I would work with probably DPW to arrange for that contract to happen.
Thank you. Any questions, Councilwoman Cole?
The Outreach and Communications Committee asked Chris to kind of school us a little bit on this, and thanks to Betty Ann and Allison, we have the example monitors on the wall, which council did discuss at the last meeting. Chris, I think that this is important. I believe the other members of the government probably do, they'll tell you themselves, but we don't know what kind of winter we're gonna have. I'm pretty eager to get this system in place. I know that some of the comments at the last meeting were maybe just do one monitor for folks in the chamber and one monitor for folks at the desk. Maybe you got that feedback, I don't know. But for a while, there was conversation about maybe two, and I recall the conversation went something along the lines of, this is enough. And for the benefit of the public, the idea was that we want to continue to have hybrid meetings. We want to be able to get better at hybrid meetings. And the monitors would be a place where we could see folks who are not in the chamber if they call in to speak or share or ask a question. But it is also a place where we can present materials or documents that the council may be looking at can be up on the monitors so that the folks in the chamber or at home would be able to see the same materials. That may not be the case 100% of the time, but that is conceptually, that's the idea. So thanks for being here tonight. Did I get any of that wrong? Is that all right?
No, everything was right.
They call by telephone, they're not gonna see, we're not gonna be able to see them.
Correct. And they don't have to show their camera technically, they
Right.
speak, unless there's a protocol for that. Also, just from the usability of it, my recommendation is a simple system to use.
Yeah.
I've been doing similar setups, I guess, at the high school, since COVID started. And it's a very similar system to what we have set up over there. And it's basically just one computer system that has two monitors, kind of like a command center, where Alison's sitting now. And that would be able to manage the actual Zoom meeting. So for the broadcasting out for a hybrid meeting, it would allow hooking up like the Al camera so that the community can view the room as well and also hear. And then the TV is the display, because one of the monitors would be for the display that would show on the TVs and also be broadcasted publicly. And then the other monitor would be kind of Allison's, control panel. Where she can have her own thing up that is not displayed publicly, so she can only have one computer at that, table.
Who runs it, your meetings? The IT team run it?
The IT team, runs the meetings,
So your superintendent and your clerk or whoever does that for the board, they're not in charge of it. You have someone actually come in.
yes, so for our meetings, because our superintendent and the PA host it basically on the dais, that we don't have anyone that's technically monitoring a meeting on the side. So,
And if we're having a planning board meeting and the planning board attorneys who are giving a presentation for the applicant, and they're displaying information, how do they have to get it ahead of time to have it displayed to the public via Zoom?
would there be a borough employee here, or is it purely just a council, like a committee with?
Well, there's a planning board secretary there, but they have a meeting.
But I mean, as far as access to the computer, I mean, the computer will have internet access. So if there's someone here that has a borough login, they can log into the machine. And then we can access the internet, whether it's email, OneDrive, Dropbox, any way to transfer the file electronically that way. I would recommend not using thumb drive, but it's another possibility. Desperation, yes, but not a recommendation.
Could there be a generic for the professionals to log into the system to this point?
I can do something like that. I would set up where it was a generic login, they would only have access to the internet. So they would not have access to anything that was internal as far as network files, stuff like that. So keep it moving secure.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Chris. Just thinking here now, the last issue. Watching Allison hard at work, if she were to be the one to run the technology aspect, we would need like another monitor for her. Right?
But they said there would be two, one for me where nobody could see, and then one for the.
Okay, so that. Missed that extra monitor in here.
My vision for that desk would almost be taking that computer off the desk. And then putting some type of mount, whether it's next to the table or to the wall in front of Allison, that basically comes up and then has two arms to hold the monitors. So there will be no loss of table space in front of the monitors.
Yeah, happy to hear a lot of this can be done internally. Outside of electric. Further questions?
Yes, I do have a question. You provided us with two quotes. Do you favor one over the other?
I would go through and pick out the best materials and whatever the better prices are. I mean, it might even be a mix between the two different companies.
Okay,
There may also be some other items such as a wire molding conduit that we may purchase locally, if you have a contact with Home Depot or Cooper Electric. That's, I usually find that they have better materials at a better price when dealing with high school, so.
so you would oversee the project regardless.
Yeah, regardless, I would be overseeing the project.
Great, thank you.
This is great. My only concern is, if there were a 55-inch TV on that wall, is it big enough for whoever the council person is sitting in Councilwoman Cole's seat? That would be my first question. And is it too close for whoever the council person is sitting in Councilwoman Chris McKee's seat? And I know that's a hard, it's like sitting in the front row of a movie theater.
I don't think you'd ever be too close with even. But I mean, it's seeing from across the stage. I mean, obviously, if it's the PowerPoint with small text on it, it's gonna be tough to see across that.
So the question is, are we better off 55, where it's harder for the person that's far away to see, or are we better off with 65, where it might be a little bit on top of you, but everyone has a better chance to. I don't need to answer now. It's just, I'm thinking out loud.
Can I just piggyback on that, because I would like to know what this size is.
That size is a 55-inch. Oh, no, that's
23.
25.
That's 43.
That's 43. It's
That's
kind of 55 inch over here.
Because that was the initial, and you had Steve had a concern, which I.
Yeah,
believe-
because I don't think I can read this, like, I would, you know. So that sounds better. Oh, yes.
Councilman Rodriguez?
Sure, I support this. Thank you for everyone who's involved. This is fantastic, big supporter. The biggest complaint I get is not about these, it's about the owl. And as it relates to the microphones, I know it's designed for a certain size room. This room's not that certain size. I'm very conscious of that. Would be great, not today, not in this thing, but as a next layer, maybe provide some options around isolated microphones that can actually come off of the owl. Because I do think that will reduce some of the noise that gets picked up, a lot of the noise, people shifting papers and so forth, it gets picked up all around the room and causes some difficulty for hearing. So that's just food for thought down the road, but I'm a big supporter of this.
And the podium too.
Yeah, that microphone is not great.
I mean, the audio, if you think microphone you have on the Vegas now, would be it'd be much cleaner than using an owl in the middle of the room. It's also much more complicated to manage and
Yeah.
run during the event. Because every microphone has its own level associated with them, even the current system. There's a soundboard over your right shoulder
Yeah.
that has each microphone individual that can manage, and we can do something to send that to the computer to use.
Yeah.
When I'm running the meeting at the high school, that's kind of what we do at the high school, because I'm running it, I know how it works, it's a little bit easier, but
Yeah.
if we have an attorney or an accountant or a councilman running a full meeting in here, and the microphones don't turn on right away. I like to keep things kind of simple, where if you turn it on and it works. Generally speaking, the owl with the laptop has been successful for the most part over the last few months or years. And,
Yeah.
it's sound quality wise, 100%, yes, having individual microphones around, setting everything up, and I mean, the system's already in place technically. We could probably upgrade a little bit of it to make it more digital to send to a computer. But then that just adds on a layer of expertise in order to manage it.
Maybe we should be a little quieter with our papers. Because I know what you're talking about.
We can only do a mix of that, where you have both, when it's like the owl's kind of set up as the daily event, but when you guys have a full council meeting, then you switch over to the microphones. I mean, that could be a possible option as well.
Councilwoman Net?
No, that was my only issue. I mean, I think it should be at least 55. I'm not sure about 65, but I'm happy that it's not gonna be this small. It's fine.
Thank you very much. I support this. I think it's a really great addition. I'm disappointed the chairman of the planning and zoning board left, because I was gonna call him out and ask him what he thought, but he scooted out before we had a chance to do that. I think it sounds great. Yeah.
I do think if you plan on using this across all your boards and commissions, you're gonna have to consider having someone, trained to be able to run it. Because I just don't think you're gonna have, these are volunteers and you're not gonna have, the ability to work out the kinks in real time. If you don't have someone that's available for those meetings. That's my own opinion.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
I have one question. What's my deadline for meeting that?
For flu season, October.
All right, thank you.
And do you have what you need to update the costs or anything? Do we need to do anything formal, or if it's in-house, then we can Chris just go work?
Well, he's gonna have to, we'll work together on the purchase
Right.
orders.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving to JCP&L tree trimming,
Yeah,
Teresa?
just very quick, I just wanted to make the public and the governing body aware of the fact that the JCP&L is going to be doing the trimming the $34,500 volt transmission circuit that runs from their substation all along Ridge Road to Buena Vista. The Board of Public Utilities requires 15-foot clearance for every 34,500 volt line. Presently, there's no planned removals of trees unless they incur a hazard tree while trimming, which occasionally will happen. The most notable impact will be a row of sweet gums along the north side of Bridge from the small parking area in the natural area east of Fairhaven Road intersection. These trees would cut back to the main stem. There's a white oak adjacent to the small parking lot that Bill Brooks pointed out to the contractor and asked him to be very judicious when removing the tree. I have informed the Natural Area Committee and kept them abreast of what's going on. I didn't want them surprised when the trimming is going on, but I want to make the public and everybody aware.
Teresa, could you repeat the cutback clearance amount?
It's 15-foot clearance from
From
the
the
30
power line.
from the power line.
I would like our record to reflect that I think JCP does a terrible job. They brutalize the trees, the BPU authorizes them to cut from the center, it weakens the tree. It leads to branch loss and an ultimate tree loss. Period. They need to do a better job. I'm looking at you, my friend.
I agree. I think you can look across the street to Little Silver and, see the lack of a better word, I think maybe it's just butchered. It's one of these, I don't know if the outsource is the lowest bidder or something like that, but they just come back looking mangled. I don't know if we can have some sort of oversight. Maybe roads, foreman can be on site to hold them accountable. Do that 15-foot, I understand, DPU has their regulations, but it also seems like sometimes there needs to be some oversight.
Perhaps Mr. Brooks.
Mr. Brooks or
He-
our streets foreman, something,
The streets foreman doesn't have the expertise, but, Bill Brooks had already been in contact with the contractor and he does, keep an eye on them and, we certainly can, ask him to stop over a few times a day when they're working, if you want to pay him to be there the entire time, you can pay him to be there the entire time. That's really up to the governing body members, but it's a decent amount of trimming that's gonna go on in Fairhaven. It'll take, probably the better part of, 5-6 days.
Do we know anything about the licensings or certification of any people with the chainsaws?
Yeah, well, it's Aspen Tree Service, that's my recollection, that's doing the actual trimming and they would have, depending on what duties they're doing, they have various level of licensing.
can
They
I?
should.
Yeah, just maybe, we've seen added value with our borough engineer out there, the street crews. I was out there, was that last week, 2 a.m. in the morning, oversight, and he's not here, but appreciation to Rich for doing that. And, street crews are like, no one else, no other town has this kind of oversight. He's like, you're the borough engineer, you're at 2 o'clock in the morning, making sure it's done right. Which is great, and I think that's what we've come to expect in our town. I don't think it would be that much of a issue. I would be in favor of asking Mr. Brooks to kind of provide some oversight, pay him, and I think just that accountability factor for this tree crew. Be like, hey, it's not free reign here.
The notes I gave you came from Mr. Brooks. I had him, go out and speak to the contractor and to the JSCP on forestry rep. So we've already utilized him in that capacity. If you tell me you want him here for every day they're working, all day long to supervise them.
I suggest we write a letter to the BPU and get all our friends in all the surrounding towns to do the same. Counties in Green County. What the BPU allows them to do so that they don't have to come back for another 5 years is unacceptable. That's how I look at it. Trees take time. They're cutting time, literally off the trees. There's a public safety thing, and we all want our fridges to stay on when a storm comes through, but there might be a better way. I would be in favor of writing a letter to the BPU or even draft it with somebody if you want. Oh, fantastic.
Because I'm looking at regulations online from PG that say like in high fire districts, 4 foot from this. I think I don't want to just accept that 15 feet. If what Ridge Road looks like, the visual sightlines is just terrible. It is a bullshit. I totally agree. So I will help research that.
Yeah. Should you offer your name for the? Oh, yeah.
Sorry about that. I couldn't help myself. Michael, make it one.
I mean,
No, on trees.
I agree, they have done a horrible job, they usually, that, you know, from an aesthetic perspective, some of the work they've done is awful. And then they cut it to the point of jeopardizing trees, so if there's something that can be done, they'll be helpful.
The question is, they're due to start work, you know, next week in that area, so, you know. Writing the BPU is not gonna impact.
Fair
that.
point, but still worth doing is probably gonna be spinning the
And-
wind
and-
for a long campaign,
I-
worth waging.
I'd have to look, I'm not arguing for it, that's a good point. I have to look back, I think they probably trimmed this area. It wasn't 5 years ago, it was about 3 years ago, I'd have to go back and look, but it definitely wasn't 5. When they did it,
Well,
last
that
time.
15-foot cut, I think this is the law to come back for 5 years, is that your understanding?
No, it's not my understanding. I don't really know what the BPU's reasoning for that is. It's based on the size of the line. But I only say that the reason I don't think it's 5 years in my own mind is because they trimmed this less than 5 years ago.
Okay,
I just didn't remember it happening. I was
so
floored
there's
when it happened.
different lines, and that high power line that is at the top is the one that they want the biggest cut.
It's like a bait when you do it.
It's like, yeah.
So am I or am I not having Bill to supervise this whole activity?
I know, that's worth it.
I mean, I guess my question would even be, what authority does he have? Does he have the authority to tell them to don't cut that branch, stop doing that? He does.
He did it with the prior project. He went to their forestry division of JCP because some of what they were doing, what the contractor was doing was extremely dangerous. And he told them, stop what you're doing right now until I speak to the bosses there, and they addressed it from there.
Are we talking about him working for 1 hour every day? Sort of at the beginning of the day, at the end, to do an overview of what they've done, or are we talking about you want him to?
Nor do I know if
supervise
he's
the job?
available.
Right.
We're
6
talking
straight
about the
days.
trees from Fairhaven Road to Ridge.
From the, yeah, the entire trimming is going from the transmission station all the way down to Buena Vista. But the largest impact is going to be in that area, because that's where we have the most trees. That's originally why, a few years ago, Karen, we were kind of caught flat-footed when they were talking about a natural area, which I didn't want to see happen again. That's why I looped them in.
Yeah, I would say that's the area of biggest concern in my mind. I don't know, I don't know what days are specifically trimming there, but maybe, I don't know, a half a day as they get started in that area to kind of make sure that they are following a specific pattern or cut, or I don't know what, is involved specifically, but that they are not butchering these trees that we really care about.
So
I don't know.
Bill has intercepted, what is it that Bill has already done?
He reached out to both JCP&L's forestry division and the foreman for the contractor. And he's the one that gave me these notes that I sent. I had his handwritten notes, but I sent them in an email to the natural area group, which is why I had them printed off this evening.
So it went to natural area, and does that notes that you're talking about specify a scope of work or just a start, and is it just?
Well,
starting place up to Ridge?
it gives the scope of work from the substation down to Buena Vista is where they're doing all of the trimming.
Okay,
And then he talks about the fact that type of voltage line it was, the fact that there's 15-foot clearance for that 34-foot voltage line. They're not planting to remove any trees at this juncture. And he talks about where you'll see the most impact, and that's that row of sweet gums on the north side of Ridge from that small parking lot area by the natural area there. And he's east of Fairhaven Road intersection, and that's where I remember the last time it happened, because it was right along the natural area that we had
yes.
such a cutback. And then he went on to say, he also pointed out to the contractor itself, that white oak is there, that's right adjacent to the parking lot, that they want to be very careful with that one. And that's pretty much, what Bill's assessment after,
How about Bill intercepts them while they're, or he's somehow in tandem on their schedule when they get to the speak on, then that, well, particularly the oak. That's not good. And then there's no shade for Mission Ridge being now, and that, or do we have a start date from them?
They're supposed to start, sometime right after today, 15, 16, definitely it's, either the end of this week or beginning of next week. Was weather dependent, depending on where else they're coming from, and I don't
They should coordinate with Bill. I think they should call Bill and let them know when they're gonna be out. They need to knock on the door. And they'll come. And Bill will know what to do.
You need more direction, Lisa?
I'm gonna follow Bill Brooks and the contractor and make sure that we know the exact date they're starting. Then I'll give Bill the authorization to, check in with them on a daily basis.
Do they have traffic control schedule?
They're really pretty far off the right.
Oh, they're off.
Yeah.
It's exactly where to figure out when they're gonna be here.
Moving on to Community Development Block Grant Bicentennial Hall, Lisa?
Yes, you all have the copy of the email that I sent to Debbie Devitis on Thursday, August 4th, which gave a synopsis of the conversation I had with her that morning. I spoke to Councilman Cole today, and I'm certainly willing, she would like to see if we could set a meeting with them out in Monmouth County to make sure that we're well aware of every option when it comes to the grant, and to see if we can move it forward. And so I'm going to try to set that meeting up for the next week or so.
Great. Do you have any questions on that?
Thank you.
Okay. We're gonna move along to public comment on agenda items. This is for agenda items only. Please stand and identify yourself by clearly stating your name and address for the record. Is there anyone in the public that has a comment?
Hi, everyone. Snowy, 68 Garden Avenue.
Hi, Chris.
I wanted to, first make a comment on the progress. I think it was very tonight. There's tremendous, and I just wrote a couple things down for myself. But a tremendous amount of context, I think, around the restaurant ordinance and moving that forward. And I think there's explicit language that at least get this closer to the finish line and encouraging more businesses to come in with some certain guidelines. I think, having actual next steps as it relates to AV equipment, I think can only help. And there's a pretty packed room compared to most meetings, but I think we're certainly moving in the right direction in terms of having more community support. And I think the AV equipment will help. The awareness around the JCP and all training, I think Tracy's comments were really impactful. We do have to be careful about what's going on in our trees. I think people just bring awareness is super helpful. And I think, now that we're thinking about Bicentennial Hall and this option to have a brand, I think it's fantastic. And for me, and I think for many others, it begs the question around, the entire facilities plan. And I know it's not part of the formal agenda tonight, but Bicentennial Hall being one of the facilities we're talking about. The question becomes, and I've heard this from several residents who have been knocking on doors, and I know my running mate Josh, Terry Lavera said the same, but the question and concern that we're hearing from residents is really around the process in which we have put forward the plan for these facilities. So we're talking about police department, we're talking about DPW, we're talking about Bicentennial Hall. I think there's no question that everybody in the community wants to move forward. We want progress. We want to see better buildings for those that work there as well as for our residents. The question becomes, what is the process, right? And so for those that have been involved in facilities since the inception of the strategy, Chris and probably others, what has been the process, has given the fact that we are, 6 years into inception for $600,000 in as it relates to architectural and engineering fees. We now have this grant, which is fantastic. Now it has become the right time for all of us, the House and Council, to consider taking a step back and thinking about a needs assessment for our town and thinking about what does the future look like for all of these facilities and what do we need. I mean, we can all agree that office space is changing. How many offices do we need in this section? How many, community rooms do we need? How many, DPW offices do we need versus, conference rooms? And taking that, information again along with Bicentennial Hall, doing the same exact thing, taking a step back, looking at what our needs are, perhaps placing a budget value with that number and then moving forward with bids. I think it would be really helpful and much more efficient. And I think a lot of the community would agree, that if we could do a needs assessment, get really detailed information on what we need and what we're planning for and into the future, and perhaps putting a budgetary number on that, or at least a range, will get us a little bit closer to where we want to be. So question for the group as to whether or not, that is being considered, as whether or not take a step back and do a volume.
Thank you, Kristen.
Is that a rhetorical question? I don't know if I want to.
For anybody involved in facilities.
So, yeah, I'll make a quick comment. We've got a facility that's about to fall down on the DPW's heads. And I'm scared, and we need to take action. This council seems to be okay with kicking the can down the road. I'm not. Same thing with black mold. It causes significant health problems. If our cops get sick and we didn't do anything about it, that's not a good situation for any of us to be in. We're putting their health at risk for the long run. It's been 8 years now. I know you said 6. It predates me. The previous councils haven't done anything. I think this council will. I don't know how much time we have. We could delay it further, but I think that would be further putting all of their health and livelihood at risk. So I'm not a big fan of that. I'm not looking to rush anything, but we've got some pretty good plans, at least for those 2 buildings, as far as recreational facilities, as far as the Bicentennial Hall and Borough Hall plans. I think we could take a step back. I think we can take some time there, but not in those other 2.
I think it's just the risk reward behind, the finances we put forward for another bid versus, be thoughtful, not only for the town, but for the employees in that building about what we're doing. and what's in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Anyone else in the public have a comment?
Well, yeah. Thing I wanted to go up to, so my question is, where are we at with plans for the architect? I've been given direction to do any value engineering. And the last meeting, we were discussing there needs to be some value engineering. I just want to know where we're at. Personally, I do not see that we do not have an option to make any changes to the designs that is mind blowing. That we can instruct the architect to do some value engineering. Which begs the question, if we can, then I would like to know, how did we get to who authorized us to get to 98% on contract drawings that we're now locked into? And we have an attorney here. I can't believe that we can't get out of the contract and some way modify the contract, that we can make changes to be locked into a design that an architect came up with. And the architect decides your house is going to be orange, and you don't like orange, we're now stuck with an orange house. So that,
I think your first question was. Oh,
sorry. The DPW, when last I experienced, we have never put out a project to bid that we knew we were not going to bid. We just never did that. In further discussion with some colleagues of mine, we never did it because it's not allowed in the public procurement law. We cannot knowingly, I understand you, we cannot knowingly put a project out to bid to have contractors provide you basically with an estimate. You open yourself up for lawsuits from both contractors because ultimately they've expended a lot of money, time, and money. Takes them a week to prepare a bid, 40 hours worth of estimating time. They have to get bonding, forms bonds, bid bonds. that expense for that, if you knowingly are going into it just for the hell of it and getting a big bond, I would think you're gonna be sued by probably more than normal contractors.
So I think I heard maybe 3 questions. Correct me if I'm wrong. So let me start with the last one.
Okay.
If we got a good bid package back, it would be up to the council to vote as to whether they accepted that
So
proposal.
I guess that's my.
For the
question,
DPW.
because The council has already, my understanding of the council made a decision that DPW was not a priority.
I don't believe it was voted on. I think the vote was to put everything out to bid together to see what had come back.
So what is the determination? That gets back to my question from what's the determination as to what is good price? We don't have a budget.
We are in a position where we have escalating costs. So I guess a budget would just chase whatever those costs are. But going back to the question,
Yeah.
which is, how did we get here? We're trying to understand what the costs are and then maybe pare back the plan once we see what those costs are.
But there are already been some suggestions in paring back the plan, I guess is my comment.
Which
So I'm not sure why we wouldn't take those steps and why we wouldn't have an architect. I don't know what we bought from Eli that he's not obligated in some professional manner at all to make cuts to his design.
We can.
He's the one that told us it was $11 million. Okay, so that's how we arrived at our cost estimates, $11 million back in the day. We approved bonding for 13 million.
Yeah.
And now we are with a $19 million project. The architect has some responsibility, professional responsibility to cut the design or make recommendations to cut the design in such a way that we can get, we're not going to get back to 11. I'll give you that. There's no way we can get back to 11.
I would like that.
But I've heard that council makes suggestions to probably take $100,000, but we're not even gonna try and do them. We're gonna build the orange house and be stuck with orange. It's just.
So I think that was your first question, I think.
Yeah.
And so, I know the mayor, I'm going to defer to the mayor in just a moment. We did actually speak to our owner's agent about looking into how do we review things? How do we get to a point where we can value engineer? How do we potentially look at a prefabricated DPW in lieu of the design that a previous council had shown to the planning board, shown to the public multiple times, and decided to continue designs on. And it's this council that's decided that we're not going to move forward with a custom building. And we will potentially be looking at, I don't want to say significantly less costly building, because it's hard for me to say without knowing what costs are. But we are looking at that right now, and I'll defer to the mayor about his conversation with the owner agent.
Just to answer your question on what's happened since the last meeting, there were 2 separate conversations. One was with the owner's agent, in which the conversation was revolved around options. What are possible options outside of the 2 custom buildings that were presented? We asked for 3 options. 2 of them were DPW related, 1 was police related. The question was, how long would it take them? How much would it cost to provide them to us? 1 was about a butler's building for the DPW. 1 was about renovating the DPW. The other was about renovating the police department. Should the governing body decide to go in a different direction, the one thing I do agree on is there needs to be intervention immediately on those buildings. They are falling apart in 2 different capacities. The second phone call was with Eli. The question for Eli was, what would it take to untangle the police and DPW consolidated bid into 2 separate, basically taking the DPW bid off of the police department so that we could focus on the police department. In both situations, I'm still waiting to hear back from Brian and Camille.
Did we hear from, just as a follow, did we hear, did we receive the new proposal from Eli for the multi-purpose?
We have not.
No,
So
Well, we have one. However, it's missing a few things and my opinion on it. And I said this in an email that you all have, so I'll just reiterate it here since we're in discussion. There are still some things that he needs to complete to get to design. I know he's anxious to get to construction, though I did design work. You probably heard this earlier this morning or earlier here. We need to assess the AAV, we need to look at circulation, tables, some just problematic design issues need to.
I just want to see us end up with a contract that we can receive interim cost estimates along the way, so we don't get a $300,000 estimate and $1 million room
Yes.
that then we're stuck, we can't change.
Right.
I mean, that. And I again, I can't say strongly enough that I don't know why we can't give direction to the architect right now to do some value engineering.
I'd like to say we can.
We
and
can.
should. And he is not immune from also has asked for cost saving measures. We have asked for that.
Put out, responsible to put out documents that measures that you can do and not doing them is quite frankly irresponsible.
I don't think anybody's being irresponsible. Actually, we're taking our time. We are looking for some answers before we give that direction. So that's where we are today.
Again, I don't know why one has to happen without the other. I don't know why we can't have value engineering done independent of one of
Well,
the other buildings or whatever else that may be, because you might find that the existing design with certain cuts, changes, modifications, whatever you want to say, can get you to a place where you want to be, and you don't have to go back to the drawing.
Not if it's off by 40% or something like that, and as a cost discount. And that's really what we're trying to get to. And that was the purpose of what Josh and I were doing in the last
So I guess
couple of weeks.
So then why are we putting it out to bid?
We're not,
You know you're 40%
We have-
over, and then you're saying, we're gonna go out to bid on DPW to see what the number comes in at.
We
How can that be?
we haven't put out the bid, sir. We actually are determining, should we unstaple it, which is really your comment from the last meeting.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do is potentially unstaple it if it makes sense to do that. If it makes sense to keep it stapled together and bid it out, we will. That's what we're trying to get to. And then if we do end up value engineering a design that we put out to bid, then we'll put the bid out together as a package. If we decide to separate them off, PD is gonna go out alone and DPW is gonna take months to redesign. And that's really the reality of how this goes when you are putting a plan together. Because you've done this before, you know how long it takes to put a new design together.
Yes, and value engineering, just as a point of fact, value engineering is part of the process and every project, no matter what,
And I don't think
projects
anybody's,
are still value engineering.
I don't think we're disputing that. What we're talking
But
about.
you're not even gonna do it.
Yeah.
Hold on, though. I think you're being disingenuous because several council members have made suggestions on
Yeah.
value engineering and amendments that can be made to the
But
plan.
no direction's been given to the architect yet.
Hold on. I think, though, there's still opportunity to do it. Just because it hasn't happened yet, doesn't mean we're saying we're going to build these plans exactly as they've been proposed and or go out to bid. It's still, we're in that process. So I hear what you're saying. You want to see action taken toward the value engineering.
Well, because of the same. You're saying that this is process is protracted over 6 or 8
8 years.
Yeah, and
But where.
right, but you have to recall,
There needs to be.
you have to remember
There
prior,
needs to be direction and deadlines.
you have to remember that prior governing bodies change over every single year. That makes this process a little bit more complicated than your average, let's build a building, right? And then you have to look at the fact that throughout the past 6, 8 years, there's been numerous iterations of let's buy this property and build it here. We'll start engineering plans. Oh, we can't do that. Let's buy this property and build it here. Nobody wants to do that. Okay, let's go back to square one. Where are we gonna build this? We know we have a problem and we have to address it. So it's taken iterations upon iterations. And as that process has happened, this governing body has changed immensely year over year over year. I'm not suggesting that that's acceptable. I'm just explaining that there is a history here that explains why, it's not just like we said, like, let's build a building here and it's taken us 8 years to come up with a plan. It's much more complicated than that.
And I can appreciate that. My point is that there doesn't the direction that was. Eli I thought after the last meeting, we need to give us a new proposal for the multi-purpose room, just for example. And here we are, 2 weeks later, and the council is not voting on a new proposal for the multi-purpose room, so.
He did though, and there was comments for revisions.
Okay.
So we're waiting for that. It's
Yes.
not that we haven't given feedback and said, yes or no on what Eli has proposed. We asked for those.
I'm
Correct.
not sure it requires a revision,
You know what?
but that's all on email, and honestly, I think that's confusing. And to back you up on one thing, there was talk of a resolution to put these projects out to bid. You didn't mishear that. That actually came up here, and so that might have set off some alarms legitimately. I think we're in a different place right now. We're trying to create, I understand that there's an effort to get options. This council needs options. The price of the buildings is too high. I can only speak for myself in this moment. The price of the buildings is too high. And I would like to see options so that I can deliberate with my colleagues on what the best thing for Fairhaven would be long-term. But options are necessary.
Moving forward, our engineering department, design process is that's just.
You're right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before I ask anyone else, I didn't want to stop because that was obviously, it's a very important topic and it's a passionate topic. But right now we're on agenda items only, so anyone else on agenda items only, if you want to further discuss that, please move that to the good of the borough at the end of the meeting. Anyone else?
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for the time and deliberation on the restaurant language.
What's your name, sir?
Sorry, Michael Mitchell, Baton Rouge. And I especially want to point out that the restaurant committee has not stopped working. 3 other, well, I guess, most of the folks sitting in those meetings, with the exception of Dan Bush, here, I'm sure Dan's, we'll try and reflect Dan's opinion. We were given a really tough mission. And Councilman Cole and Kirk McKee, we both expressed the sort of, we have to develop context around it. We have to make it more broad. We have to look at some of the other issues. And we had so many of those debates in the room, and it was opinions. I can assure everyone, and I welcome Carolyn, Todd, Betsy, Teresa to comment on this. We sat down in the room at the opposite ends, or probably 4 different points of the compass, trying to figure this out. And we decided to try and turn it into a process that narrowed it down to something more scientific. And Councilman Cole, we actually took the concept of the master plan survey and narrowed it for the benefit of the restaurant question, and had 913 responses to that. If you look at the forward, it does 2 things that really, with the board and recommendations, it both cites the fact that this is disparate disease. I mean, we were really, there was the opinions of no fast food all the way to, let's just leave access open, encourage small businesses. We don't want to slow things down because people, we don't want to kill the commercial district. And so we started there, took the results of the survey, and then tried to balance that against developing business and then figuring out how to encourage business to come without getting overreaching. And that was the biggest risk. Too many words, too much language, or too few words and too little language would run the risk of tomorrow, or as of tonight, McDonald's is welcome in town, Friendly's or Burger King. We talk about Saddlebrook as an example. I heard that when you look at the map around the Burger King in Saddlebrook, you've got an Advanced Auto Parts and Smoke Shop, you've got, there's a certain, you know, thing that happens in the character of the town that I think people were concerned about expressing themselves through the survey. And we're looking for us just to put some sort of governor on how the decision was made. And that was even up in itself a tough mission. And what the genesis of that was Mike Irene's, you know, probably, you know, hundreds of hours of work, or, you know, 100 hours of work to try and bring in as much as we could to make the language as defensible as possible, again, while creating a check valve, so that the businesses that we care about, you know, there is, you know, Buster Do, there's Lupo, we talked about, you know, is Nicholas, you know, is that a fast, you know, quick serve restaurant? All these businesses that you know people love that might get caught up in the definitions, didn't want to get caught up, quite frankly, interest in commercial development. If McDonald's wants to come to town, they can come in front of in front of the board, and they can put in an application. It's not entirely eliminated. So it was really hard, and I think right through our, you know, last conversations on this, we remained in debate and, you know, in point and counterpoint. And what I encourage the council to think about is, this is the first step in what I hope is the series of steps in terms of the town thinking about how to pull more businesses in, but also not leave ourselves victim to outside influences. You know, we don't want to say, you know, I hate to say it, the town has expressed that they want a certain character of town based on the master plan, based on the survey. We want to express that, we want to bring businesses to town. And right now we're left with, you know, we're 2 years into this, we're exposed on this language, we've worked really, really, really hard. And I just encourage, I encourage, expeditious conversation on it, just to make sure that, we have something in place. We start to guide forward versus continuing for another 2 years thinking about it. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Very much.
Very well said.
Anybody else?
No, it's great to see you. Andrew Greger, 52 Back Road. First of all, I just want to thank the council for actually taking on this, the subject. I know it can be huge and obviously long lasting, but I think it's very important. And it's impacted the last decade, for future generations. I obviously want to thank the folks in the restaurant committee. I know how much time it is for them, and also Mr. Irene, I think he did a tremendous job in explaining the very obviously complicated situation or perceived as such. I'm just here to say, I support the change in the ordinance. I know they're concerned about perhaps it being confusing for Sally and Joe or whomever coming in. But quite frankly, I think the existing ordinance is actually really confusing and super ambiguous. And the reason we had the issues with Duncan, I think Mike makes a very good point in that we are trying to encourage small businesses to come into town. But at the end of the day, we want to keep the town as it is. We want, most importantly, we want the character of the town, we want the safety of the town. And I just point out that we're from a land perspective, Fairhaven is 1.6 square miles. Saddlebrook is 3.2, almost, or a little less than 3, almost twice the size. Fairlawn is 3.5 times the size of Fairhaven. So for us to have these formula fast food restaurants just really doesn't fit in character and importantly the safety of the town. So again, thank you very much for your time. Thanks everybody for their hard work, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Inkin.
Anyone else in the public have a comment?
Hi, my name is Carolyn Ferguson, 7 Forest. I am a member of the restaurant committee and also, at least for 10 years, the secretary of the Fairhaven Business Association. As you know, the Fairhaven Business Association continues to concerns about the complexity and the vagueness in the language of the fast food definition. I won't repeat myself, I've spoken about it twice, I think I've been clear about that. We want to continue to have a vibrant business district, and the town we see having an increasing role. I've used the example before, if you look at the Acme
we now have 3 restaurants there, we had none, and that's pretty recent. We feel it's important that our ordinances are encouraging for some type of restaurants to come to Fairhaven. We are trying to spell out what's not allowed, but I don't think it's clear what is allowed. And just as you consider whether you support the definition, I ask you each to kind of exercise the process. Pretend you're the zoning officer, pretend you're designing the desired business district, and you get applications in front of you. Mr. Irene mentioned Panera, Mike mentioned some other examples of restaurants. Is it clear to you, do you find clear legal guidance about which one is allowed and which one's not? How you would allow a Panera but not allow something else, and which part of the definition gives you legal support for that. So I'm just asking you to really, exercise the process and think about how it will be carried out. And just we all, said before, I think we all basically agree on what we want to achieve. I think some of our challenges are in how we achieve them. And I think we'll all agree that we don't want to leave the town exposed to legal challenges. And we don't want to repeat some of the mistakes that we feel, or unpleasantness that we feel we have gone through before. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Anybody else in the public have a comment?
Does anyone on Zoom have a question on the agenda? If you do, please raise your hand and I'll recognize you.
Anyone, Teresa?
No, sir.
Okay.
Oh, wait, excuse me, I do have one person. Andrew Love there. Go ahead, Andrew, you're allowed to speak.
Thank you. Just wanted to, we'll be able to talk further about the facilities towards the end. Didn't want to impact the rest of the meeting.
Yes, let's push that to go to the borough, please.
Copy that. Thanks.
Anyone else, Teresa?
No, sir.
Okay. Moving along, we're on approval of minutes. May I have a motion to approve the July 25th regular and executive session minutes?
Motion. Second.
Alton, may I please have a roll call?
Members, Commissioner Keith,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Todd,
Yes.
McHugh,
Yes.
Net,
Yes.
Frederick.
Yes.
Thank you. And does anyone have any old business? No. That being said, let's move on to new business, council committee reports, starting with finance with Councilwoman Knapp.
Not much to report. The finance committee met briefly last week to help figure out some items related to the PVA negotiations, more in terms of understanding what is it that we think that the town can afford as far as that contract is concerned, and I expect that we'll have more discussions about that. Anything else to report, Teresa, on the finance side?
No, only that we will be looking at annual capital, small ticket capital requests in the next couple meetings, and I just wanted to do that. And
And that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Moving on to personnel, Councilwoman Chris McKee.
We are still searching for a part-time administrative assistant for the Department of Engineering and DPW. So if you or anyone that you know is interested in a part-time role with Borough, there's information posted on our website and you can apply.
Thank you. Moving along, planning and zoning followed by parks and recreation, Councilwoman Koch.
Thank you, Mayor. The planning board meeting originally scheduled for tomorrow night has been canceled due to a lack of agenda. The next zoning board meeting, again in person, will be on September 8th. As far as Parks and Rec are concerned, the concert on the dock originally scheduled for Wednesday has been rescheduled for next Wednesday, August 24th. Camp is over. It was a very successful season for our campers, and that is it.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. Moving along to police, fire, office of emergency management, followed by engineering and DPW, Councilman McHugh.
Thank you, Mayor. Quick update on the police, if you didn't see through the Borough communication, they're hosting a women's self-defense course at Millwood. August 5th through 7th, time 5 through 7 p.m. Nothing else for police, fire?
Thursday.
Oh, you're right. August,
August eighteenth,
took that down. So what was that again, Councilwoman?
August eighteenth. And the timing, I believe, is 5 to 7.
Oh, August 18th, time is 5 to 7, yeah.
It was the first in a series.
No, it's a one night. It's a one night show. It's all that.
Oh, basically.
No, sorry, yeah, I had the time at the,
Okay, thank you.
yes, come check that out. Thanks to the school for letting us use their facilities. Fire, obviously, the Fireman's Fair is coming up. I know personally, I'm very excited for that. The fire department is hosting a sign up genius. If you're looking to volunteer, you can reach out to, I think it's Richard Brister.
Rich Brister.
And nothing on the OEM side, engineering, DPW, engineering. Willow Street is pretty much almost. They could just do some striping. But it looks great, really eases nicely into the drainage. Ties it all together, done just in time for school, which is great. The brush grind has been completed. I'll be interested to look at the numbers now that we have some more data. It seems to be less than half of what we had Rumson in, so it's been a great, lessen the burden on the residents in that area. Third Street plans, we had a DPW meeting. We discussed the Third Street plans, and not solely, but in part because of the AV situation. Rich is unable to present the plan for Third Street. As is, they're about 90% done, I'd say. Couple of key things to kind of call out and just kind of plan your minds for when you guys present in September. Pretty much straightforward, mill and pave. Plan is to straighten out Third Street from Sportsman's Field going east. You notice that property that has been kind of abandoned, but they're working on now, really juts out into the street. So we can pull that back, make the curb line more uniform throughout the road, widen it. Great for the students on bikes.
Will that go all the way to Cedar, the widening?
No, part of Cedar will pretty much line up to. We can show you, but
Okay,
maybe like 5 properties down
okay,
is where we'll
got it,
kind of
got it.
meet back up with the curb line.
Okay,
There's no plan for sidewalks allowed on the north end. If anybody was wondering about that. Some right of way issues there, so no sidewalks, just curbs. The other things we were discussing is obviously, the proximity to the school there, that kind of raises some alarms with the safety factor. Children going there, the widening will help. But it obviously terminates at Hance. So Rich is proposing that corner curve on the northeast corner, so Sportsman's, where one crossing, one crosswalk is, to actually bring that corner out, which will essentially tighten Hance. And when you tighten the roads, tends to slow down the traffic. So slows down the traffic. Also will be, a less shorter distance to travel for the students crossing. The other thing that we were kind of, concerned that personally, they were talking about eliminating that one crosswalk. I don't want to show any bias here, but I would kind of thought, well, the sidewalk runs that entire way down from Fairhaven Road all the way to Hance. And realistically, I don't know how people's behaviors if they're going to cross Hance and then cross Third and cross Hance, just to meet the sidewalk. Obviously the school raises kind of like a lot of safety issues and traffic issues with the children, but also want to consider things for, the dog walkers, the kids outside of school, the mom or dad pushing a carriage across the street. Making that cross across hands. Would that essentially be encouraging jaywalking? So, I think that will be something we'll discuss, get your opinions on. And I share where I think I am with that. That was it. Do you guys have any, I just want to open it up if you guys have any questions on Third Street.
No, I think we're gonna get to look at it together and then it'll be easier to picture what Mike's talking about.
Yeah, so yeah, just wanted to kind of like, couple bullet points to put in your mind. We will get a printout 11x7. I think Rich said, at the next council meeting to actually visualize and see. Just
Great.
kind of want to get that out to the public too, where we're at. That's it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Rodriguez, Borough Facilities.
I think I've covered everything I would have covered. Thanks, Bill. Otherwise, so I'll keep it short. Clearly, getting value for the borough is important. Trying to get it right. Yes, after 8 years, I've only been doing this for 4 on the facilities committee out of those 8. But yes, we want to get it right and we will get it right. I think the next meeting will have some progress to report. And hopefully something that's satisfactory for the council to opine on and maybe move forward.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Cole, Borough Communications and Community Outreach.
Yeah, sure, Mayor. Outreach and communications in August recess right now for Betty Ann. Never stops. I want to encourage anybody who hasn't signed up to receive her, the Borough blasts or the constant contact thing, the interchangeable names, which we're going to work on. Anybody has a great name for our constant contact, please feel free to call the central office and leave your thoughts and ideas. We've been brainstorming. The Environmental Commission is to be hosting the a representative from the American Littoral Society and to discuss the subject of the Normandy Park and some of the plans that have been discussed over a period of time. Sort of went quiet for a while, but the Environmental Commission is going to look at them now, really kind of untangled from some of the former Yacht Works issues. So the public is invited. They'd like for people to show up. It's a worthwhile time if you want to come and participate or just see what they're doing. You'll be able to zoom in. The Green Team is hosting a film on August 18th. It's the first pilot project. They're imagining a conservation film series on a small scale in the lawn at Bicentennial Hall. It is the first one is going to be shown on the 18th, so this week. And the film is Kiss the Ground. I understand it's beautiful. It's a shorter film, so it's not a 2-hour feature. There will be popcorn and perhaps some other things, and we'll be accepting donations for anyone who would care to make a contribution towards preserving Bicentennial Hall. Mike, Nick and I are going to write a letter to BPU and copy the Shade Tree Commission. So that was my Shade Tree Commission report. And the sidewalk sales coming up, and the Fairhaven Business Association will be hosting sidewalk sale 23rd and 24th. Carolyn, do you want to add anything?
No, is that the
Yeah,
yeah, it's leading up to the start of the event.
yeah. And that's everything there.
Thank you. One thing, Councilman McHugh, that I think they're gonna be done tonight, which is exciting,
Yeah.
because maybe it might go to Tuesday, but River Road, we're right there. So I think that's time we can all. One more experience. Oh, here we go. Oh, no.
Thank you for the full development in Harrison. I think it's a little extreme because they took 4 nights to get more in there, but the good news was that during all this, the actual downtown never got protected. It was really after midnight, so it kind of worked out. Not a plan, but it worked out that you very good chance it was never closed. That's the whole time, but yeah, they're there now, and if everything was the plan, it should be done tonight, but I don't see how they're going. Next Friday is supposed to be this Thursday.
Great. Thank you, Chief.
And I will say it took a lot of hard work. Took a lot of hard work and coordination, the mayor worked with us, Rich's team, just to make sure we got it done before the fair, and, it was a lot of,
Looks great.
it's well worth it, let's put it that way, for all the discussion we went through.
All right, we're gonna move on to introduction of ordinances, starting with 2022-12, amend chapter 2, administration to update and clarify borough claims payment and check signing procedures. Does anyone have any questions before we?
I was just confused. This is when there's a claim lodged against the borough there, we just didn't, it seems like we had an extremely brief procedure. And that this is far more complex.
So that is for, it's not necessarily just for claims, for example, for my bills or
Oh,
for your cleaning supplies, it's payment of vouchers and invoices.
That's,
So you have internal accounting controls that are amply in place, as you know, from the annual audit. However, there's been some updates and there's been some COVID updates in particular. So you passed those procedures as a temporary measure during COVID, so you didn't have to trade physical vouchers. And this is essentially memorializing it in the ordinance to make sure that it's permanent, and obviously there's exceptions there. Can't have the employees send out vouchers for themselves, without having the appropriate paperwork and things like that that are safeguards, but functionally, those are the internal controls that have been in place here since 2019. And so it's time to codify them, so they're in, permanent.
and on required signatures, just so you know, our, Evans program prints 2 signatures on the check. That are actually printed with the checks. And what this is doing is saying it'll be the mayor and the chief financial officer as opposed to the mayor and administrator. So that leaves myself or Allison to be the live signature, because we're the most practical live signatures. We're here. We wouldn't bring the mayor or Colleen in from Middletown. So this is just memorializing what we're actually doing in practice now.
Oh, I see. And some of it you've done by resolution, the payments process where we don't have to have the vendor. The auditor request would be done by ordinance. Because resolution, you'd have to do year to year to year. It's easier to keep it in code.
You have a question? Anybody have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Allison, may I please have a roll call?
Councilmember Commissioner Key,
yes.
Cole. Yep. Cox.
Yes.
McHugh.
Yes.
Net.
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
And hearing and adoption will be September 6th.
Thank you. Going to ordinance 2022-13, amend chapter 7, section 14, parking prohibited at all times on certain streets. May I have any questions on that? Nope. Anybody have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Allison, may I please have a roll call?
Commissioner Key.
Yes.
Cole. Yes. Cox.
Yes.
McHugh.
Yes.
Net.
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
Thank you. We are moving to the consent agenda. We're speaking resolutions 2022-176 through 2022-189, with the exception of 2022-182, which has been pulled. Just cross that one out. Before we move to a vote, does anyone have anything they want set aside on the consent agenda?
I will abstain from 176 as I did in the last meeting as well, due to professional conflict.
What?
We need to vote on that separately then?
Councilman Rodriguez's abstention would be noted.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I'm abstaining because I'm in a professional relationship with the person that this is, that 176 has to do with. So I'm just abstaining. I'm not voting yes or no.
Anything else need to be separated? Does anyone have any questions on anything? Good. Okay. Anyone
No, I
have-
just want to thank Marty for
Yeah,
raising the trap, neuter, and release program that is now on the consent agenda.
and Greg,
Thank
they
you
got
very
it
much.
on consent money.
Very quick.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Allison, may I please have a roll call?
Councilmember Key.
Yes.
Cole. Yes. Cox.
Yes.
McHugh.
Yes.
Net.
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
Tracy, I would say we could even add that to communications and community outreach. That
Good
we now
idea.
have this program available for wandering cats.
Yes, I'll do that. A small update if I may, Mayor. I have this just in. Thank you, Carolyn. Sidewalk sale is the 26th and 27th.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Department reports, July of 2022. Do I have a motion to accept the reports as submitted?
Motion.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, go to the borough. Please stand and identify yourself by clearly stating your name and address for the record. Please observe a time limit of 3 minutes. Anyone in the? Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Richard Kramer. I'm here tonight with my wife Melanie. We are here because we need to help. My way of background, we have lived very happily in the borough for 27 years. We raised our only child here. She received an excellent education in the school system. But today we are both over 70. We have some health problems. A few years ago, our great first aid squad came over at a critical moment. And Chief McGovern, who lives down the street from us, he came over too. So for a while, we had a whole first aid squad and Chief McGovern in the living room. They took very good care of the situation today. But we want to move closer to our daughter and husband in Connecticut, where they are expecting the first child. And our daughter is a nurse practitioner, and she would like us to be closer to her. However, we were unable to sell our house in the past year because of an old drainage easement that is on our property. The easement has been on the property for over 60 years. It has never been previously an issue or a problem, but things are more complicated these days, it seems. We detailed the issue in a letter that we previously submitted to the Borough Council. And in that regard, we would like to thank the Borough Attorney Greg Hammond for working with our attorney on the matter and developing an approach that addresses the issue. So tonight we're asking that the Borough authorize an agreement that implements the approach that was developed by the attorneys. And upon approval of that agreement, we feel that we will be able to move forward with our plan for the sale of the house and relocation. And we think that it's in the public good because it clarifies the matter with respect to the location of the easement on the property and the location of the house. We appreciate your attention to that matter. We thank you for it.
Thank you, Richard. I remember that from a few months back. Greg, where are we?
So as we talked about, we're either going to be a choice between moving the line and moving the house or the middle solution. So we talked to Rich, and Rich preferred not to move the subdivision line, as you recall. So Mr. Gorman, the Fairness Attorney, sent me an irrevocable license. We essentially have one last point, which is when that license would terminate. So Rich had originally mentioned substantial improvements to the house or something akin to the substantial destruction. The only sticking point in the license that we have at this moment is it says that the existing home no longer ceases to exist, which is a step farther past what Rich said. So I think that if I get together with Rich and we come to a reasonable condition precedent for the license expiring, that the rest of it is fine. I mean, it's 3 pages and we're talking about one line, I mean, in summary. But I think we can have it in September to get it done. Have these people on their way out of town, hopefully with a clean bill of health on their title.
Just add something, it'll just take 2 minutes. I just want, this was addressed in the letter, but I just want to make it clear, the house was built when it was built almost 60 years ago. It was built on the encroachment. And then subsequent to that, a previous owner built an addition with the same encroachment. The town has absolutely no information that they're able to give us to who okayed that. If anything was, if the previous owner was given any documentation saying that this was acceptable, nothing. So we don't really know if it was approved once. Obviously, someone did approve it.
And I think that's for the public good of the borough going forward for future owners, prospective buyers, that be
Oh, so I think what, if you, look, this is the best guess, but you asked me what happened. The subdivision maps weren't always online, right? They're now on the county record. You used to have to go to title search them and pull them. And so I think at some point in time, someone gave a building permit for a foot over that easement without checking the surveys that are in the land use file, but not checking the subdivision plan, which would have predated the original structure to begin with.
Okay, but they did the same thing for the.
Did it twice, according to
Yeah.
the records that I have, yeah.
And then when someone came and wanted to do a pool, they saw it. They saw that
Yes,
because that's listed there.
as the information
Yeah.
became more readily available, I think over time, you can.
But I'm just
easily put
saying
them all
that
side by side.
someone or multiple people approved this at the time, approved it twice.
Yeah, I don't, for my part, I don't think you built what's
No,
there, right? You're just the subsequent owners.
For 27 years, the house has been there for 60 years.
Right.
I think there was three owners prior to us from all this.
That's what I don't know how many owners, but I know that you guys didn't build actually without them. to begin
No,
with,
we
so.
didn't build anything.
We'll work on that last night and we'll hopefully get it papered up in September for you.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Richard. Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Marty Andrew, 33 Hants Road. So first of all, I'm standing here with deep gratitude for the quick action that the council and the people to get the SPCA done, really working on it. As soon as that happened, the truck appeared in front of my house. And I can tell you, I could never, ever get this done without the help of the SPCA. We are still working on it. They are there every day, sometimes twice a day. We've gotten Mama, who I think is, Mama has been caught and spayed and released back on my property, and she's furious with me. I'm managed to track with the help of the most wonderful person. They have one animal control officer. Her name is Corinne, and I wanted to mention her tonight because she is absolutely unbelievable. Patient, knowledgeable, caring, compassionate, and she's there by text or person whenever we need her. But we still have 2 kittens to catch, and Mom is relocated everybody because I'm no longer a safe space. But I really want to thank you so much. You've been a huge help to me. I have one other issue, and actually it wouldn't have even occurred to me except that Mike brought it up, and I wasn't sure if I understood. Is that the Hanson River Festival that you were talking about?
No, sorry, I was speaking to, Third Street Phase 2. We're going to put out the bid. And lessons learned, Marty.
Because it was the school, and I'm taking no one for it.
Right, so it will terminate at Hans.
Yeah.
And we're just trying to get as much information about sidewalks and curbs to everyone as possible. Thank you, Marty.
So a million thanks. It's a big help.
Thank you, Marty. Anybody else in the public have a comment before we go to Zoom? Lisa, anyone on Zoom have their hand up?
Yes, we do. I'm gonna start with asking Mr. Rivera to mute himself and speak. Go ahead, sir.
Awesome. Good evening. This is Drew LaBarbera, 77 Cedar Avenue. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Couple of questions and one ending thought, but first, I know how easy it is to Monday morning quarterback projects, especially something like the new facilities that we're looking to do. And I can also appreciate how turnover can impact budget, scope, and schedule, right? So I definitely thank the council for the work to date. I think you guys have had an unforgiving job. With that said, though, we do look to the council to own these situations, even if inherited, and make difficult decisions, such as pausing or taking a step back. And it sounds like that happened. I know at the last meeting, there was some significant community feedback. So again, thanks to the council for listening to the community. I do have 2 questions. The first, I heard mentioned of, one of the facilities building falling down, black mold in the other. What kind of immediate remediations are taking place? I'm 100% behind modern facilities, but there's a lead time with that. And if there is something unsafe what action's being taken. My second question is, if the council intends to pare back and reassess once there are options, and it sounds like there was a couple meetings or emails sent out to facilitate those options, what is the pare back going to be aligned to, right? Where's the facility needs assessment for the town? Where's the requirements of the town that will ensure whatever is built, it meets our minimum requirement? And I'll just leave you with kind of one final thought. This town, which is a phenomenal community, has a tremendous amount of expertise in all areas of professionals, a little alliteration there. Tapping into those individuals can help bridge the gaps. And I think it's pretty clear there are some gaps in communication, gaps in understanding, gaps in articulating what the requirements, and whether they're grounded in perceptions or realities doesn't matter. But tapping into these individuals also offers an opportunity not only to bridge, but to be fiscally cognizant and not incur additional costs for expertise. So just wanted to offer 2 questions for the council. Again, thank you and appreciate your time.
Thank you, Drew. The one that I think I can sort of answer direct to the chief is remediation on the police. I believe you have filter systems.
Yeah, now.
Or purifiers.
We have it tested.
And as part of the DPW facility, I would say that probably factors in from the standpoint of asking for cost estimates on renovation. We would find out, you know, what it would cost to fix the roof. And, you know, look at any structural type issues that we may have there. As of something that's being done there in the immediate, I couldn't tell you that.
We have the bid specs for the roof job, but really what you're faced with is you decide to put a roof on, you're deciding to renovate the building. Because, you know, the roof will be extremely, you know, it'll be a large ticket item. So,
But Teresa, if I may, right? So design, drawings, bidding, procurement, supply chain, all of that takes time. And what I keep hearing from the council is this immediate need, right? So understanding the new roof has ramifications and implications from a cost and comparing to renovating versus new building. But if the building's going to fall down in 2 weeks, it doesn't matter how fast the council moves, the building will fall down, right? If the black mold is going to cause a significant issue, like I'm highly allergic to black mold, and that could happen within 2 weeks, right? It doesn't matter how quick we move on building to building. So the question comes, and I think the community has a right to know, and if the chief is there anything like black mold impacting, right, our community police force from doing what they're going to do, right? I think that's really the question.
If I may, I turn the question back, 5 years from now, when somebody's really ill and suffering, we're gonna know. There's a lot of unknowns when you're remediating black mold that is in the building, and we haven't taken an action here. Last year, the year before that, this council will take action. We'll continue to remediate with filters and chemicals to try to tamp it down. But ultimately, that building has a disease, and I'm hoping that it doesn't give any diseases to the humans that are in that building. And I just don't know the answer. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not licensed to opine on that. I do know that it is unsafe, and we need to take action.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, Drew.
Thank you.
Anyone else, Teresa?
yes, I believe we have Ruth Blazer. Go ahead, Ruth.
Everyone?
I want to thank the people who came back and sort of widened my driveway after I said I thought it was narrow before, and it was. But they also did about 5 or 6 others on my street, so they probably had problems too. My second question is, I'm curious, you say you're just about finishing up streetscape. Who's gonna come back to my property and put back the rocks and the decorations I had out in front that they threw up into my front yard?
Well, it's not gonna be Betsy. Teresa?
They haven't done the file close out.
Yeah, it's not,
They haven't done-
it's not done yet. I couldn't tell you exactly who that's gonna be, but it is gonna be done. Is that
We
correct?
had to focus on getting the major improvements done so we could do the mill and paving. So that they have a punch list on every. On every
Okay.
job.
Thanks for taking that dangerous tree down.
And that one, and thank you for pointing it out. You were 100% spot on that one.
It was always on the list, it just had to be done by a specialist.
Thank you, Ruth. Teresa, anyone else?
Yes, Susan O'Brien has a hand up here.
Hi, Susan.
Go ahead, Susan.
Good evening. Is it possible to move the podium closer to the owl? Because I heard no speakers tonight because I've got trucks and milling going out in front of me. So I missed most of it. My second thing is, what's the procedure for the remediation of bamboo, which I've been fighting in my yard for close to 30 years?
Teresa. It's as
I
per
did not plant it. So how do I proceed?
Then to somebody.
Yes, Susan, I asked this question, I remember, and I don't have the ordinance in front of me, but I remember I asked this question, that if someone had bamboo at the time we passed the ordinance, was it different, treated differently than someone who was planting bamboo tomorrow? And the answer is yes. So I don't have a clear recollection of how that treatment was different. I think the obligation is to ensure it is not within 5 feet of your property boundary.
It's in my yard.
Has to be removed.
Oh, no, she can have it in her yard. She just has to ensure that nothing's within.
No,
5
no.
feet.
No,
It it's
Oh,
coming
it's your
into my
neighbor's
yard.
bamboo. Oh, well, that's a much better situation to be in, I suppose. Yes, so, right, so then you would need to let our code enforcement know so that they can investigate and take whatever necessary measures.
Who should she call? I'm gonna defer to Greg here, but I don't recall that there's anything in it that has property at 123 Main going into, 125 Main to take it out of the other person's yard.
Yeah.
Not, I don't think.
You have to cut it back within 5 feet of your yard.
Right. But there's nothing that says that Susan's neighbor is gonna come into her yard to clean out her.
Not as a matter of our ordinance, but as a matter of common law. And it's the neighbor originates on the neighbor's property. It's the same as if someone had tree roots going through your basement wall.
She had most of her bamboo taken out. There's still some small stuff along the property line. And of course, I have the rhizomes in my yard that I've been trying to eradicate for years now. And I don't want to pay to have it done because I didn't plant it.
Right.
I
So
thought it was the obligation.
I mean,
of-
I headed into a pile of that. one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's a lot
so
of work.
Susan, can we get back to you?
Sure.
Yeah, I think we'd have to figure out the facts and like apply, whatever the ordinance is versus the common law, private rights of
Okay.
action are.
Okay.
That's significantly more complicated than the bamboo grow.
Thank you.
Do I need an attorney to pursue her?
We're gonna get back to you on this.
Maybe.
Very lawyerly
yet.
answer.
Lawyers, that's maybe.
Maybe hold your retainer.
Okay, HD. The hand up, go ahead, HD.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me? Awesome. It's Wilson Rodriguez on Allen Street.
Wilson.
Hey, good evening, council. First and foremost, thank you all, particularly the council members that have been around for several years championing the DPW and police department renovations. Particularly, I want to focus on the DPW. I know this topic has been going on for several years, probably perhaps upwards of 4 to 5 with multiple iterations, each time changing with different board members coming in and about, and most recently having significant community involvement, where members bordering the DPW provided significant feedback regarding the function and the flow of the facility, and other feedback from community members involving parking, of which the most recent design would improve. Additionally, the flow on Allen Street with respect to vehicles dropping off parcels. Sometimes there can be upwards of 3 vehicles impeding the flow of traffic on Allen Street as people just stop wherever they want, whatever time they want, blocking the driveway of either the DPW and or residents and things of that nature. So it's more than just, one of the points I want to mention is just more than just patchwork to the existing dilapidated building that's been patched and so forth, that perhaps reached its shelf life, if you will. So things to consider more than just the micro view of the building, but perhaps the macro view of the community and the other factors and benefits that the most recent design can provide. Outside of that, I want to thank everyone for their support on this ongoing topic, and the community itself surrounding the DPW looks forward to something. And also, during times of significant needs, such as big storms, power outages, we all salute the DPW employees for their endeavors. So we also owe it to them to have something to look forward to, something to perhaps boost their morale, something to come home to, a workplace environment that's perhaps, the best for the employees that perhaps do the best work in our town. And that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Wilson. Teresa, anyone else with their hand?
Nobody else with a hand up, sir?
Okay, with that, we're going to move along to executive session. Formal action will not be taken, 9:44 p.m. Do I have